task. In many cases, they've got to be subjected to 5 to 6 police checkpoints. I'm going to try to show you a picture now of the swarms of people that are coming into the area. Many workers wearing face masks because this smell is strong. Let's look at this picture of the NASDAQ site here. I am told at 9:15 there will be a moment of silence honored there at its work site in a show of solidarity for those who have lost their lives and those who are fighting to save lives. And we will join Lou Dobbs on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange right at 9:30 as the opening bells ring. And joining us throughout the morning to give us as many perspectives as we can find, John King, who will be following the developments around the White House and then on Capitol Hill. He joins us from Washington this morning. Bill Hemmer, who will join us from outside the New York Stock Exchange, who will continue to talk to these workers who are finding a new reality when they show up for work this morning, and Miles O'Brien, of course, who will have the very latest on the investigation. And that's exactly where we're going to start this hour with Miles to bring us up to date on the very broad investigation underway right now. Hi, Miles.
Thanks very much, Paula. Good morning to you. Here are the latest developments in America's new war. Pakistani officials presented a U.S. demand to the Taliban government in Afghanistan today. The demand: turn over Osama bin Laden or face an attack from the U.S. The Federal Reserve, in anticipation of the opening of the markets, announced a 0.5% interest rate cut. 2 new arrest warrants have been issued for material witnesses in connection with last week's terrorist attacks. 2 others are being held as material witnesses. A UN agency says an already catastrophic humanitarian crisis is becoming worse as refugees leave Afghanistan in anticipation of a possible U.S. attack. And the skies are busy over the U.S. The FAA says as of 7 a.m. Eastern, there were more than 2,000 jetliners in the skies. During peak times, on an average day, there are between 4,500 and 5,000 flights in the skies at any given moment. Back to you, Paula.
All right, thanks so much, Miles. We head straight down to the New York Stock Exchange. A lot of news made this morning. Americans can look forward to a 0.5% rate cut. Lou, what do you think the impact of that rate cut will be?
I think the impact, while helpful, Paula, will not determine certainly the direction of this market. It does improve the environment, an environment that can stand, of course, all of the help that it can possibly receive. But that 50 basis point cut, that half-point cut, is just not going to be significant in terms of what happens here, at least in the early hours of trading. We're starting to see some indication of selling pressure that we'll be facing these men around the trading post when we open in just about 27 minutes. We're getting some strong indications of selling on the ADRs for U.S. stocks that are traded here overseas. We are in Instinet trading. We see Microsoft, Intel, Oracle, Cisco, all of those stocks in early Instinet trading are off 6%. Now, again, that's not a particularly liquid market, but it is an indication. Perhaps it won't be that severe, but certainly there is an indication. And we know, because of the nature of this terrorist attack, that the airline industry and the fact that it has been curtailed in the last 6 days, we knew that it would be under pressure, and indeed it is. On the Instinet trading desk, those stocks are down significantly. In the case of SkyWest and Frontier, 2 small air carriers, their shares off more than 20% in early indications. So that 50 basis point rate cut has a lot of work to do to influence the outcome here.
There is a lot of debate over a congressional or potential congressional bailout of the airline industry. Lou, how much trouble is the American airline industry in today?
Well, it's in significant trouble. Airports closed, as you know. Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C. is closed. Continental, Delta, both have curtailed their schedules by 20%. We're expecting, obviously, more layoffs. Continental announcing the layoffs last week of some 13,000 employees. They're in difficult trouble. They have about 1 month's cash on hand. So there will be some assistance required by the federal government, and indeed the Congress. The House of Representatives is already working very hard to put together an appropriate package, whether that takes the form of a classic bailout or an extension of guarantees or loans. We don't know, but it will be there and it will be significant.
All right. If you look at the front page of the New York or the Wall Street Journal, which I know you did today, economists are saying that a recession may be unavoidable. But earlier this morning, you were touching on consumer confidence levels. Do you expect consumer spending to freeze?
Consumer spending certainly won't freeze, but it has obviously been affected by the reduction in air travel last week, the fact that people could not open their businesses and buy products here on the lower part of Manhattan. That's a small part of the larger macrocosm that is the economy. But at the same time, we saw in the most recent CNN Gallup poll, President Bush's approval ratings have never been higher. The American people are obviously united in what the president has called what he has called a new war, a war against international terrorism. So we can't make these judgments too early. There are a lot of positive indications, but we also, in this free market democracy, have a lot to work through. That's going to begin at 9:30 here, Paula, as we watch these stocks begin trading for the first time in less than a week.
Well, we're going to join you for that moment, and we're also going to join you when a moment of silence follows that opening bell. Thanks, Lou, for that update. I was actually struck by a trader behind you who appeared to be holding an American flag in his crossed arms. Right now, I want to show you a little bit of what I saw yesterday. I was able to get into the area of Ground Zero, an area where journalists have not been able to get into. I pardon you for the quality of these pictures. I was not allowed to shoot any video, but this represents as close to anybody has gotten of what is going on in the rescue effort. You can just get an idea of the sheer force of the blast that came through here. It is so eerie to see a partial structure, a building like that stand. I don't know how else to describe it. It is shocking when you see it. This is an adjoining building to the east of where the World Trade Centers once stood. Someone able to get a flag up there. You look at all these adjoining buildings, one financial plaza here, a lot of windows blown out, 100 buildings in the surrounding area, either damaged or in some way structurally degraded. This is what I was struck by, how instructions were spray painted on the walls of buildings. This is an aid station. Here you see what we call graffiti, where rescue workers have put messages like this on the walls. Be safe. Very poignant messages. You are loved. You are missed. And we saw dozens of windows. Now, this is interesting. Look, the New York Fire Department Buildings Unit was here. You know, never say die. I never thought hate could do this. God bless you all. Many tears will fall, but we will continue. It makes us stronger. It says, to who we are. I'm proud to be here as part of this team. More messages here from the Montauk Fire Department, all written in the ash, which still is caked onto the windows. Personal messages here, but in addition to that, we also saw fire workers and iron workers marking where they had been. This is Local Union 361. This is the front door of the HSBC Bank. We will overcome. A lot of the lobbies of these buildings being used for triage to store supplies for the rescue workers. This is the outside of the HSBC Bank, once again marking where you could go to get first aid help. You could see how quickly people were pressed into action. God bless America, and you see things like that once again scribbled into the cake of ash that still covers many, many windows in New York. Let's right now go back to Bill Hemmer, who continues to stand by on duty outside the New York Stock Exchange. You've had a chance to discuss what the work life is going to be like for many of the 75,000 workers who have converged on this area. What else are they telling you, Bill?
Yeah, Paula, good morning once again. I tell you, this is an absolutely remarkable sight. This part of New York, or any part of New York, has never seen a scene like this before. Joe, if you could, go ahead and push past me a second. I want to show our viewers further up Broad Street here what's taking place right now. Pardon my back here as I turn. The New York Stock Exchange, the front facade is on the left up the street. What we're seeing here, construction workers using backhoes to help lay additional cable line and fiber optic equipment. Police are everywhere, sirens rotating across on the top of a number of vans and police cars. Security extremely tight. National Guard is here, state and local police as well. And if we can go up just a little further, things are starting to clear somewhat because we're only, I guess, about 20 minutes away from the opening bell. But this scene that you're watching right now is just, it really takes you back. In the history of Wall Street, one has never seen anything like we're watching today. More security personnel coming through up the street here again. If we could show our viewers a higher angle, I believe we have a camera positioned well above the New York Stock Exchange that shows the front facade of the New York Stock Exchange with that giant flag that's been exposed. And again, a symbol again of the financial strength in this company and what Richard Grasso, the chairman, has said. His intention is to show that indeed the stock exchange is safe and secure and strong once again. The other thing you pick up, Paula, as you watch this particular angle, the air again is full of smoke throughout the day here. We're watching the smoke and the steam drift our way. It appears it's drifting eastward at this time, and people walking throughout the street here with masks and other articles of clothing held up to their mouth, trying to keep that smoke out of their lungs. We've just been told that the governor, the New York governor, George Pataki, has arrived. He, along with New York's mayor, Rudy Giuliani, will help participate today in the ringing of the opening bell above the trading floor. Also, the Treasury Secretary, Paul O'Neill, arrived hours ago, about 6 a.m. Local time today. Also, Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton is on hand today. We are seeing a number of people come out, and for those who are looking for strength and security in the markets, indeed, the people who have showed up here today, are trying to display again their confidence in what we're seeing. I mentioned security. It's extremely tight. There are brokers and traders and employees of the New York Stock Exchange that normally they tell us they can pass through security in about 10 or 15 seconds, but today they're stacked up hundreds in line, getting bags checked, going through x-ray machines and waiting to get to work. Also, a worker just came up to me here and informed me if people are watching, trying to get to work today, they're saying when they get off the subway system here, they're checking IDs very carefully. They say if you want to pass and get through, bring your company ID. They're indicating that that is the best way of having success they're getting here. And we talked about the emotion. So much emotion here in this part of New York City, the financial district. Many of the people that were working here last Tuesday, new people, friends and family members in the World Trade Center, and it cannot be underscored enough how much emotion they must be feeling at this point. We talked to a number of people thus far today who say in many ways it's just good to be back, to see friends and colleagues again, but others say that the smoke in the air reminds them of last Tuesday. One person even saying that it smelled like death. About 15 minutes away from the open. We'll watch it from down here on Broad Street, right near the New York Stock Exchange. Paula?
I'm surprised to see your eyes look as clear as they look this morning. I know when I got out of there yesterday, my eyes were stinging, and
Wow.
I had to wear a mask in the area that I went into. You feel it, don't you?
Yeah, indeed you do, and you can smell it too, and it does get in your eyes, and that's a good reason why so many masks have been passed out. And as I look down the street again, people continue to stream up, Paula, and so many watching their mouths and making sure their lungs are indeed are A-OK. We'll watch it again. Back here shortly.
All right, thanks so much, Bill. We're going to go back to the NASDAQ worksite where we are just about 2 minutes away from a moment of silence, honoring those who have fallen, those that continue to fight to save lives downtown. In a very interesting note, the head of NASDAQ, after that moment of silence, will actually be headed for the New York Stock Exchange in a show of solidarity. These two exchanges are quite competitive, what one might say in an understatement, and that is seen as a very powerful signal to the folks that work down there of a strong show of unity. Let's check in with Greg Clarkin right now, who follows NASDAQ matters. Now, these tech stocks were in a state of flux and volatility before this. Greg, what are you hearing about what confronts traders there today?
Well, Paula, right now things look like to be a very jittery marketplace. What's called the pre-open trading period has been going on for about 45 minutes. That's where some NASDAQ stocks trade on some of the electronic trading networks. Just take a look quickly at some of these names. And these are companies that have issued buybacks. The SEC relaxing their rules on buying when a company can buy back stock, how much they can buy back. Today, dozens of companies doing that as a sign of confidence and hoping to lend some stability to the marketplace. Cisco Systems said it would buy back about $3 billion worth of its stock. Its stock is down sharply. Starbucks, the same story. It's going to buy back its stock. Its shares are off sharply. Intel also increasing its buyback program. It is down. Paula, back to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Greg. Actually, let's continue our conversation so we can dip into the silence actually, this is the moment of silence, Greg. Let's pause. And there you have it, the end of the moment of silence that the NASDAQ just practiced. You saw the neon lights go dark on the facade of the building. Now they're back up. This similar scene will be repeated downtown at the New York Stock Exchange after the opening bells that will ring at 9:30. Lou Dobbs will join us on the floor of the exchange then. Let's go back to Greg right now to get a better sense of what folks are bracing for there. Have brokers eaten a really big breakfast to get through this day, Greg? I can't even imagine the amount of pressure they're feeling this morning.
Exactly, Paul, and I don't know if anything can prepare them for that. You know, in speaking with some of the trading desks this morning, they said it's just an incredibly, obviously, an emotionally charged feel to the open this morning, and that is something that really unnerves a lot of folks when you talk about the markets. Emotional buying or selling really on one side of the coin or the other really is not something a lot of traders like to see, but that's what they're expecting this morning. Also, keep an eye on the volume. They're expecting today anywhere from 2 to 3 times the normal volume on the NASDAQ. It's an electronic trading systems. They have passed all the stress tests they conducted over the weekend, but still, that's going to be something to really watch today, especially in the first 10 to 15 minutes. So between 9:30, quarter of 10, maybe 10 o'clock, you're expected to see a real surge in volume. And again, the stocks that are expected to lead the downside, it's expected to see some selling early on. Some of the airline stocks, we've seen Northwest shares, which were back here on the board before. If we can look at those, they're down 35% right now, again, in the pre-open trading. One thing to point out about volume, the pre-open market, generally speaking, you don't get the big volume, but today we are seeing an incredible surge in volume in those stocks. Microsoft, for example, down about 6%, has already traded more than 1 million shares in the last 45, 50 minutes in what is usually a thinly traded market in the pre-open, Paula. So a lot of folks just kind of buckling in for the next couple of hours.
Those seatbelts on. Greg, for folks that don't follow this stuff as closely as you do, we mentioned that the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange are extremely competitive. What is the significance of the fact that the head of NASDAQ will be heading downtown right now in a show of solidarity to be on the floor at the open of the New York Stock Exchange?
Very symbolic, Paul. I mean, over the weekend and speaking with some of the folks at the various exchanges, there was a real feeling that the best way to kind of send a message of stability to the markets was through unity, and that's exactly what they're hoping to do. And that is significant to see Wick Simmons, who's the head of the NASDAQ, down at the NYSE. These are two rivals. Companies do change places back and forth here occasionally, so there is a real rivalry built up. And today, though, that all being put aside, kind of locking arms and hoping that the markets will, open on time, open normally, and have somewhat of a stable trading day.
All right, thanks so much, Greg. We'll be checking in with you a little bit later on this morning. Right now, Andy Serwer joins us. If you folks read Fortune magazine, you will see his pieces there, and he also has a website, or you do columns on the internet, right?
That's right.
Okay,
Yep.
So people know who you are. You and I talked a little bit earlier on about the federal rate cut, the 0.5%. You've been on the phone talking to traders, talking to brokers. What are they saying?
Well, I've got to tell you, the anticipation is rising, the anxiety is rising. We're just a few minutes away. Everyone's laying down their bets, getting ready to go. Lou talked about tech stocks being lower, so did Greg. Airline stocks are down. The one that's trading, Northwest in pre-market trading, is down almost 40%. We have to remember, Paula, where the market was before this happened, and that is a weak market. The market was not doing very well. So the fact that things fall from here should not be that much of a surprise, because we had some weak numbers, some weak economic forecasts and indicators as this was happening and before it happened. So if the market goes down, it's not just the fact that we had this tragedy. The economy is not in great shape.
Some economists are saying this morning, some of whom were quoted in the Wall Street Journal this morning, you can't stave off a recession.
Yeah, and
Are they overreacting?
No, I don't think they're not. I think it'll be difficult to stave off a recession. Let's remember, last quarter the economy grew 0.2%, which is to say barely at all. This quarter, even before this episode, the economy was barely growing. And look what happened here. Major parts of the economy have simply not been functioning for an entire week. The airlines, Wall Street, just those little incremental bits can move the economy into a negative growth mode. But having said that, I don't think people should be so concerned, because we may have been heading there anyway. And I just spoke with Michael Price, the big investor, and he said it's like Muhammad Ali getting punched in the gut in the first round. He got punched in the gut, but he's going to come back because it's a long fight, and I think that's the way people should look at this.
It's a powerful analogy. As we speak, you're going to be competing with the image of the facade of the New York Stock Exchange, because we, of course, are just about 9 minutes away from the opening of the exchange. Yesterday, various administrative officials were put out who basically repeated the same message. Get prepared for a war that doesn't last days, doesn't last weeks, doesn't last months, but lasts years. If there is any kind of military action that is launched, historically, what will these already weakened markets end up doing?
Well, obviously it's not good news. And you know, it's so interesting. We're talking about a market response to this episode, this horrible attack that just happened. The response to that on Wall Street will be unknown. We're about to find out. Layered on top of that, and people aren't even discussing this, would be a military response. What kind of a military response? We don't even know. Will there be a widespread attack in the Middle East? That would be very bad news for the world economy. We could see oil shocks, and the damage could be much more severe.
Andy Serwer, if you'd stand by, I want to catch up with Lou Dobbs, who's on the floor. Here we are 8 minutes away from the opening bell. You, Lou, have described the amount of pressure these traders are under, but there's a tremendous amount of pent-up raw emotion there, too, about what kind of toll this tragedy has taken on this community. Tell us about that.
Paula, the emotion here is rising dramatically. Everybody is moving into position, and it's going to be very difficult. Dick Grasso, the chairman of the New York Exchange, if you can hear me, is addressing these four traders and specialists, joined by Senator Hillary Clinton, Senator Charles Schumer, Governor George Pataki, representatives of the New York Police Department, the New York Fire Department and Emergency Services. A very emotional reception as these traders welcomed them with an outrageous ovation as they assumed the balcony.
We're going to stay with the sound for a moment or two to give people a sense of appreciation of the show of solidarity here, because I don't know if we're going to be able to hear you.
Paula,
you can jump in here whenever you think you're not going to be drowned out.
Okay, Paula, if you can hear me, these traders are getting ready to do business, but a very defiant mood. If I can, just let me give you the setting for what is going to happen here. At 9:30, instead of simply the opening bell, the New York Exchange will observe 2 minutes of silence. 2 minutes of silence, and then Major Roseanne Scrignoli of the United States Marine Corps will sing God Bless America before trading actually opens at 9:33. If we can get the cameras to pan, and I would appreciate if you could pan over to the balcony where Dick Grasso is addressing the exchange and introducing those people who will help to open the bell. There we are. Now, Dick Grasso, who's done a remarkable job here of leading these people and leading the effort to restore the New York Exchange to
criminals who inflicted this heinous crime on America and all Americans, that they have lost. Our nation has come back together as we have in times past. Whether it be war or economic challenge, we are one country today, committed, unified in the pursuit to find and punish and obliterate those who committed that horrible act against this great nation. I want to thank so many people, so many agencies. This resumption of trading.
And we want to welcome our CNN FNN viewers now as we join the CNN coverage of Dick Grasso addressing his traders with a defiant talk about those who are responsible for these terrorist attacks.
Coming to New York and saying he hears, he experiences the pain, and those who took those buildings down will hear from us soon. Today, we are graced that we will, at our tradition at 9:30, pause to reflect for 2 minutes on those whom we've lost, on those who are still missing and God hope still alive, and certainly for all who were killed and injured in the Pentagon in Pennsylvania, those wonderful people on the planes. This is a moment of reflection. So at 9:30, we will single stroke and pause for 2 minutes. We will then be led in God Bless America by Major Roseanne Scrignoli of the United States Marine Corps. After which, our heroes, representing the fabulous men and women who are crawling through the rubble as we speak, seeking survivors, representatives of the New York City Fire Department, Police Department, the emergency services and rescue teams, and the Port Authority Police. Our heroes who make today's resumption possible will ring this opening bell. And make no mistake about it, these wonderful men and women who put their lives on the line, all of the agencies, police, fire, emergency rescue, all of the varying neighboring police departments who are here, allow us to do what we do. This couldn't happen without their great guidance and help, and certainly their love and affection for this great country. Let us celebrate these wonderful men and women. Ladies and gentlemen, each of the wonderful public officials who are with me on the podium will join me on the trading floor, and I know you will join me in extending the traditional NYSE welcome, a hug, and a job well done. We wouldn't be here today without this fabulous partnership. Let us all pause in a moment for a reflection of 2 minutes, followed by Roseanne's singing of God Bless America.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains, through the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. Oh, God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, our heroes will now open the marketplace. The green button.
And there you have it from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, the opening of the markets. A great deal of reference shown for the firefighters of New York City, the firefighters from all over the country that have come in here, and a defiant statement from the chairman of the New York Stock Exchange saying the U.S. will find, punish, and in his words, obliterate those responsible for these terrorist attacks, saying that the 2 minutes of silence were meant to reflect on those lost, those killed, those injured in New York, Pennsylvania, and New York, and those that might still be alive. And you can see the NASDAQ has a new look, worksite, a new look right now with the big words open across the front of the facade. It was an amazing group of people surrounding the chairman of the stock exchange this morning. Dick Grasso's flanked by the governor of New York, both Senators Hillary Clinton and Senator Chuck Schumer, as well as firefighters, police officers, and other folks involved in the massive effort to continue the rescue and cleanup operation. Let's go to Lou Dobbs right now for what he saw during the moment of silence and what he saw once the markets got open. Lou, can you hear me?
Yes, Paul, I can hear you. I hope you can hear me. It is not often at the New York, as a matter of fact, it has never happened in my experience, 2 decades here, that one could not hear the opening bell because of the thunderous applause. These traders, these specialists, giving the welcome that they deem appropriate to the representatives of both the fire and the police department here. And as those representatives rang the opening bell, it didn't take long to see what was in store for this market. The Dow is off 110 points already. Looking over at the NASDAQ, it's already fallen 109 points. Those are the lowest levels of the year already. We knew it would be a difficult open, and while it's much too early to judge, for the first few minutes of trading, we've been open now just a little better than 2 minutes. These are significant declines, and we see in almost every sector, whether it be financial, retailing, airlines, of course, we knew would be hard hit today, and they are being. We have a very weak open, and we'll just have to see what's going to occur throughout the morning here. But so far, we've seen no let up in the selling.
Lou, I guess it is fair to assume now that we've heard that very powerful rendition of God Bless America that most Americans will never hear that song the way they once did. You, I know, have talked with people who have shared with you the very conflicting emotions they're feeling today as they get back to work and try to keep these markets propped up.
Yes, there is, and I said this early this morning, I would hope that no one would decide to buy a stock in the belief that he or she could change the direction of this market. I understand the patriotic support, but the fact is that this market, what makes this such a powerful market is that it's a free market, an efficient market, and the basis of free market democracy in this country. Vote your heart, your pocketbook, but be a long-term investor as you should have been before, and I hope you will be after, and including today, because that's what makes this country and these markets work, moving in self-interest and moving decisively with your money that you want to invest in these markets. This is a strong, resilient economy and market. And no matter what happens here in the short term, in the next few hours or the next few days, this country is blessed with a very strong economy and the greatest democracy in the world.
Lou, earlier on you were reporting about the significance of the Fed's announcing a half-point rate cut, and you told me earlier you didn't think that would move the markets all that much. But what are traders telling you about their reaction to the half-point cut?
Their reaction is muted. In point of fact, they are now looking at a Fed funds rate of 3%, a discount rate of 2.5%. In any other environment, this would be wonderful. In point of fact, it is the 8th cut, the 3rd intermeeting rate cut this year. We see right now with the Dow Jones Industrials off 143 points, the NASDAQ Composite off 103 points at new lows. It's not having an appreciable effect. combined, however, with strong leadership, strong support for the president, a high consumer confidence going into the open of this market, these things will ultimately have a very positive effect. I'd like, if I may, to bring in Joe Grano, who is the CEO of UBS PingWeber, and Joe, good to see you. If I can ask you to step over here just a bit for our cameras. I know this is going to be a terribly difficult time for you. Give us your thoughts on this day.
Well, I couldn't be prouder to be an American and prouder to be part of this industry. The real heroes are east of Broadway, west of Broadway, and these gentlemen and ladies in this room sent a message to the free world that we're going to maintain a free market. And we are the center of that capital market, and it was imperative that we got open today.
And great credit has to be given to Dick Grasso and to this community for getting this market back in very short order.
Well, last week, all of the heads of the firms met, and there are a lot of unsung heroes in that regard, too. All of our employees that worked throughout the nights. I'd like to particularly signal the work that Verizon has done. Their crews have been going, and they've lost some people in this tragedy as well, and I couldn't be prouder of their efforts and the efforts of all the employees of the street.
As Joe Grano points out, what many people may not realize, the largest switching station for Verizon was located under 7 World Trade Center, which of course collapsed. The work that's been done here by Con Ed, Verizon, and all these firms is
well, they lost a switching center in the tower and on West Street that was impacted when 7 fell, and they have one on Broadway.
Give us your judgment about what you think is going to happen in these markets today.
Well, it's very hard to predict, but so far it would suggest that we're not seeing a panic sell, and markets are very efficient, as you know. I think that many Americans are going to maintain a calm, see what happens. I, for one, when I get back to my office, are buying securities in my own account.
Joe Grano, thank you very much. And for those of you, a lot of people may not know it, Joe Grano, one of our most decorated Special Forces officers. Joe, good to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Ken I just saw Ken Langone here just a moment ago, but he is apparently moved over. We have a number of the heads of brokerages here in the midst of all of this trading. As Joe Grano pointed out, while these markets are moving significantly lower, there is no, as he said, panic, but I don't think there's any way in the world we should underestimate the downside pressure here. As I look up on the ticker, the up volume, 5 million shares to this point, and again, we've only been open a matter of less than 10 minutes. And against that, a down volume of 40 million shares now, so just about 8-1 in terms of the down to up volume. It is a very difficult market right now. The tick is decidedly negative, but frankly, I will tell you, it's not as negative as one might expect. And with the NASDAQ composite here holding after less than 10 minutes at about 106 points lower, while that is, of course, a significant decline, it is certainly not as bad as many people, and in fact, a few of the people on this floor had led us to believe they expected. So we've got some pretty good order in this market right now, and by order, I don't mean that this market will necessarily move higher from these levels or that it will not fall further, but it is an orderly market, and importantly, the world's largest capitalized market, that is the New York Stock Exchange, with some $13 trillion in market cap, and the average daily trading level of about $45 billion is back in business. That is very good news for both this economy, irrespective of the direction this market takes, and of course, very good news for the global economy.
Lou, I think the picture around you might be deceiving to folks who aren't used to watching the kind of action that takes place on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, the constant blur of people whirling around you. This is normal, isn't it?
It is absolutely normal. It is, if you will, I would say just a little more, a little louder than normal. There's a little more activity. The fact is that we've got volume here after a few minutes of about 54 million shares now. There's a lot more conversation. Not all of it has to do, of course, with trading stocks. So there's just a little more activity, but bedlam is the nature here of the New York Exchange, as you know, Paula.
Of course, but given the volume of trading and the potential technical difficulties, I was surprised to hear that the chairman doesn't have any kind of contingency plan in place. They seem confident then that you're not going to have the same electrical problems that so many of the buildings in the surrounding area have had.
Well, Paula, as you were down here, I've been out near the World Trade Center area, walking around these blocks. What has been done here is nothing short of remarkable. But ringing this building, ringing the American Stock Exchange, are Con Ed generators, mobile generators that have been brought in. Frankly, they've done everything they possibly can to provide what support. And from here, there's just, after this devastation, there's no redundancy, and they're highly confident, certainly Dick Grasso is highly confident, that, that it's not going to be required.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I give you 110 points for standing there without getting knocked over. That is, on a very good day, hard to not be knocked over by the constant activity.
Well, I think that there may be some there may be some mercy being shown just in the nature of the day. I've tried to stay out of the way, and they've tried to avoid me, and we have a very efficient market in that respect working as well.
Okay, Lou, thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul.
Right now, I'm going to briefly check in with Andy Serwer of Fortune Magazine, and we're going to interrupt that and come back to a little bit later on with just your reaction to what Lou just said. The Open wasn't as bad as he had expected. CNN, FN folks are telling the same thing. Do you share their analysis?
I do. I'd like to echo what Lou said. You know, I was just thinking, Paula, that if I had been asleep for this entire week, and I wish I had in some sense, and just woke up today, and you had showed me those numbers, the Dow down 200, NASDAQ down 100, I would have just thought it would be another lousy day given what's been going on in our economy and the stock market over the past couple months.
Hey, look who's hanging out with Lou Dobbs now. I don't know if Lou's able to do an interview with the mayor. Lou, can you? Can you get a mic in the mayor's face there?
We're here with the distinguished mayor of New York, governor of the state, Charles Schumer, Senator Hillary Clinton, and they obviously in the balcony to open this market. Mayor, may I ask for your thoughts today?
Well, this is a day in which we all reaffirm our confidence in America. They tried to destroy us. They tried to destroy our economy. They took an attack right at the financial capital of America and the world, and we're back. We're going to deal with finding our people, helping them, rebuilding, and we're going to be stronger and better than we were before.
Governor, your thoughts?
This was not just an attack aimed at taking down two towers and killing thousands of people. It was an attempt to take away our spirit and our freedom and to cripple our economy. It hasn't worked. Our spirit has never been stronger. Our unity has never been greater. And now we're going to show the world that our economy is still the world's greatest, and it's going to grow, and America will come through this stronger.
I know that each of you has expressed in your way, his and her own way, your appreciation for what the federal government is doing in the way of support here. Give us an indication, if you would, Senator, what you expect to happen in terms of the use of that money in its earliest form.
Well, the way we designed it, and with President's help and Rudy and George on the phones working late at night, we'll have some flexibility with that money. We need it for all sorts of things. We need it to help reimburse the city and the state for the hours and hours of overtime that their workers have done so selflessly. We're going to need it to help rebuild. We have subway lines not working and close to 30 million square feet of office space that won't be usable. And then we're going to need it to bolster our industries, our insurance industry and some of the others that are really in trouble. This is a first installment, but the president, when we asked him to help us, didn't try to cut it in half, didn't try to say, well, come back later. He said, you asking me for $20 billion? You got it. And I think that says a lot about the unity of the country and what we can do. You know, we were the #1 financial market last Monday. We're the #1 financial market this Monday and forevermore. And again, thanks to this giant who did such a great job.
And I'm blocking this giant, Dick Grasso, Senator Schumer referring to Dick Grasso, the chairman of the New York Exchange, if I can get over here.
Well, Lou, we are so very proud of this public-private partnership. As you can see, we've united as Americans to send a message to the world. America's back in business, and if you bet against America, you're dead wrong. This, I think, totally embodies the American spirit. We've all dropped our traditions of right or left, Democrat or Republican. This is about America. This is about people, and we are so very proud of this wonderful team from the public, from the private sector. But let us not forget, Lou, that lives were lost terribly, terribly, tragically, and the one thing that we must never forget, we will go on economically to rebuild this city, to rebuild the spirit of this nation, and we'll do it in the memory of those wonderful people who are not with us today.
Senator Clinton, I know that you have toured the devastation that was the World Trade Center. You have watched this market open. You have watched this market in the course of less than 20 minutes lose about 250 points. Your thoughts?
Well, Lou, I'm just proud that we're open today. We're open for business, and I'm grateful that America and the world is supporting us. Now, clearly, we've got some tough waters ahead. Nobody would tell you any differently. But I am absolutely confident. You know, the strength of the American economy today is just as strong as it was last Monday. Our fundamentals are very vigorous. We're dynamic. There's no doubt in my mind that we're going to go forward. And it's important that people invest and buy and spend, because we need to send a clear message to the people who did this that they have not in any way affected our way of life or our values. We also have to get our economy moving, because we have a lot of work to do here. We were grateful for the $20 billion, but it's going to take a lot of money to rebuild New York, and I'm grateful that America is supporting us.
Senator Clinton, thank you very much. I want to thank all of you gentlemen for your taking time to share your thoughts with our CNN viewers around the world, and also maybe inappropriately so, thank you personally for your leadership. Outstanding, in my compliments, and great respect. Thank you. I would like to, if I may, reach across. Treasury Secretary Paul O'Neill is here. Secretary, it's good to see you. You have got to be very proud that this market, some $13 trillion in capitalization, by far the world's largest, dwarfing all others, is open.
I'm really excited about what's going on here today, with everyone coming together and demonstrating America's resiliency. I think both as a people and as an economy. Market's bouncing around a little bit right now. That wasn't unexpected. But we will persevere and we will prevail, Lou.
Well, Mr. Secretary, I'm looking up there and I see the NASDAQ, as you say, bouncing around, but it is backed off what were earlier lows. We're making a great deal of analysis out of about 20 minutes of trading, but I hope you'll forgive me for doing that. What do you expect to happen today?
I don't know. You know, this is an unexampled event in our lifetime. And I don't think we can predict today, but I think we can be sure and have a lot of confidence that you will see these indexes go back up, and we will set new records in the not-too-distant future. Our economy was beginning to rebound before this event, and we will rebound, and we will do well.
Secretary of the Treasury, Paul O'Neill, with very encouraging and reassuring words, and I think all of us are hoping that you're a terrific forecaster as well, Mr. Secretary. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You know, Luke, Paul and I were saying earlier that if we didn't have blind trust, we'd be buying.
Right.
Well, those of us who don't can take a cue then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, you're allowed to do this just once. Thumbs up.
Okay. Two hands.
Well, I've got to go to...
And there you have it, a giant's thumbs up from Lou Dobbs, flanked by Treasury Secretary O'Neill, Senator Clinton, Senator Schumer, the Mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani, the Governor of New York City, Pataki, all urging Americans to have faith in this economy and to be optimistic about what these volatile markets might yield. The mayor saying that at least New York is stronger than ever before. Governor Pataki saying that the unity has never been greater in this state and across the nation. Senator Schumer giving President Bush a great deal of credit for not only giving the state of New York and the other areas hard hit, Pennsylvania and Washington, $20 billion, but in fact $20 billion more than Senator Schumer and Clinton asked for. Senator Clinton saying that she's proud that the United States is getting back to business this morning. But if you want to continue to prop up the economy, that Americans must invest, they must buy and spend, and then making a pretty funny joke about if her assets were not tied up in a blind trust right now, perhaps she would be doing some buying this morning. Andy Serwer here to provide his perspective on what we just heard. Lou was standing in the right spot this morning, wasn't he?
Yeah, they just are attracted to Lou, I guess, and that's terrific that he got comments from all those people. Have you ever seen so many people so excited about a market down 270 points? That's what struck me, but the point, of course, is that we're working, we're operational, we're back in business. I want to temper things a little bit, Paula, and remind people we're only a half an hour into trading. We've got a long way to go till 4 o'clock. And the other point I'd like to make is just to sort of put this in perspective about how momentous this day truly is, and to understand that people, business leaders, investors from around the world, China, Europe, the Middle East, are all watching the New York Stock Exchange and the U.S. markets to see what's happening right now. So it truly is remarkable.
I was struck by something Secretary Paul O'Neill just said when Lou Dobbs was able to corner him. I guess it's sort of hard to get out of that area of the exchange right now. He basically said you can't predict where the U.S. economy is going, but his prediction is, quote, "We will set records in the not-too-distant future." Is he overly optimistic, or does he have reason to believe that is the case?
Well, he may be doing a little jawboning. After all, he is an administration official. But, you know, there's some indications, if you look historically, what happens during calamities, catastrophes. The market takes a hit, and then we come back strong 6 months later. If you look at the Cuban Missile Crisis, if you look at the wars and, you know, Eisenhower's heart attack, there are all these moments in time where the market bounces back. In fact, we were speaking with Arthur Levitt, the former SEC commissioner, and he suggested that this may exacerbate things to the downside, but then we may pick up even more because we're going to need all this spending to rebuild our economy, to rebuild our infrastructure, and that could actually stimulate the economy and get us back out of this downturn even faster and even higher.
The chairman of the New York Stock Exchange perhaps had the most defiant words all day long. You can almost feel the personal toll this has taken on him at his time where he's trying to restore faith in what he has got to do today. I was surprised that no one mentioned the half-point rate cut. Are you, or do you agree with Lou Dobbs that it's not going to move the markets all that much today?
Well, you know, I think it has helped the market. You really can't say. I mean, if they hadn't done the rate cut, would the market be down 500 points here? So there's sort of no control to the experiment, if you will. It probably did have some impact in terms of helping the market psychologically, showing traders, showing investors that the Fed is there on their side, ready to make a preemptive strike, which in a sense is what that was. So I think it did have an impact, but I think Lou is right in that, you know, we've seen 8 of them now, and it's just another rate cut, but it was a very important one, unexpected, and it gave the market a shot in the arm, I think, before the open.
I don't know if we can revisit the shot now of Lou being flanked by all these leaders, world leaders, state leaders, surrounded by senators, the governor of the state, the mayor of the state. Tell us a little bit about the psychology of what happened there and the impact it might have. They all obviously had positive messages today.
It certainly has brought together an incredible nonpartisan group of people. I was speaking with Senator Schumer a couple of days ago, and you know, when something like this happens, people do band together, Republicans, Democrats. The CEOs of the major Wall Street firms have been working in concert. It really is a tremendous show of strength and unity, but that's absolutely necessary, Paula. You have to come together. I mean, the effort that has been made to bring us back so that we're trading this morning is truly monumental, and it was absolutely necessary for all these people to throw aside their differences and get to work together.
As we continue to talk, I wanted to point out for those of you who probably have better eyesight than I do, throughout the day you will see that Dow and NASDAQ bug to keep you apprised on where the market is going. The Dow now down 470 points.
Yeah.
It changes every second. At what point would the market action be suspended today? What would be the point drop at which that would happen, if that happens?
The percent change, I think, would be over 5% at this point. So we're a ways away from that.
I'm not saying that's going to happen,
right.
Of course, but just for people to keep an eye on this during the day.
I think they should, and that's about where they would come in. Now, you have to understand there's so much computer trading these days. A lot of times, drop percentage changes, especially versus treasury bonds or the Nikkei, other indices, sets off buying and selling strategies. This is exactly what we expected, Paula. Volatile trading and the market down. This is just what we thought was going to happen.
We obviously had to focus on the opening of the New York Stock Exchange, but I think a lot of individual investors out there are wondering, what happens if I had a broker that worked in that building, or the company's gone? Where's the paperwork? How am I going to do business?
Yeah,
How many people do you think are caught in that limbo?
Well, I think there are a lot of investors who whose paperwork was blown on to kingdom come, if you will, down there. But, you know, almost everything is backed up now on computers all over the country. There is very little records. There are very little records that are actually lost. And I think what's happened, I certainly spoke to people at Merrill Lynch. All the Merrill Lynch brokers have been in touch with all of their clients, reassuring them, retail investors saying, we're here for you, we're going to be back in business. And that kind of support, I think, has a tremendous impact on the investing public. I think that you will find when the day is done that most of the trading today has been done by institutions rather than individuals.
All right, Andy, please stand by. We're going to check in with you throughout the day. You get to keep an eye on that bug number. I'm having trouble seeing it from this angle. If I'm reading it correctly, the Dow down 490, the NASDAQ down 99. Am I seeing that correctly? It's
That's
hard. There's
right.
a lot of sun
Yep.
on this
You're correct.
monitor. All right, right now we're going to go to Michael Huku, who is standing by downtown. He has a story to share with us this morning about a firefighter's dramatic experience. Hi, Michael. How you doing this morning?
Paul, I'm doing okay. As you can see, of course, the plume of white smoke that's come to symbolize the pall that's descended over the city continues to rise. Firefighters are telling us that there are fires that are raging deep within the rubble, and they can't stop those fires until they move some of the debris from that area. One of the firefighters who has been working on this scene is Kenny Haskell. He joins me now, and he has an extraordinary story to tell us. Kenny, you have two brothers who are firefighters who responded to the scene last Tuesday.
Right.
Tell me if you can, what happened.
Timmy's a firefighter in Squad 18, which is here in Manhattan. My brother Tommy's the captain of Ladder Company 132 in Brooklyn. Initially, a fire of this magnitude necessitates a multiple alarm response. So Tommy's company had come in from Brooklyn actually on the first call, which was immediately a fifth alarm. I was home myself at the time when I heard it on the news, and they were recalling all firemen to come into the city if they were off duty to report to their firehouses, which is what I did. And as I was on my way in, I was trying to inquire whether or not Timmy and Tommy were in fact both working. I wasn't sure at the time. It wasn't until I actually got in here into Manhattan at sometime that night, 8, 9 o'clock at night, that I saw some people that confirmed that they were both in fact inside the buildings when they came down.
So as far as you know right now, one of your brothers has been found dead.
Timmy's been found. He was found several days ago. I was underneath Tower 1, a void of Tower 1, the day before yesterday when word had spread that they had found him, and some of the members from my company came and got me, and they told me that Timmy had been found, and I left, and they had sent the van to pick me up.
Now, you have another brother who's not a firefighter, but you were telling me earlier that both of you went in and literally were working the site.
That's right.
Looking for your brother.
Kevin had actually gone back with me Wednesday morning when I went back. He was helping me search, which is, I guess, a bittersweet type of thing. It's hard to describe. It was surreal. But I was very grateful to have him there. It made it somewhat easier to deal with. To know I was looking for two of my brothers and still have one by my side was comforting.
I tell you, I've done a number of interviews since this happened on Tuesday, and frankly, as I told you before the cameras are rolling, it's uncomfortable for me to actually even talk to you about this and to give some of the grim details about what's going on beneath the soot and debris in the World Trade Center. How is it for you personally to continue working this site as a volunteer firefighter when you know that you have lost 2 brothers?
Obviously, it's very difficult. I come here every day filled with optimism that I am in fact going to find my brother Tommy alive, and that's what motivates me, pushes me to continue looking. Obviously, it's difficult, but this is also my job. It's what's expected of me, and I do it readily.
This is a very difficult question, but the very grim reality of this is that rescue workers are telling us they're finding more body parts than they're actually finding bodies. You have been in there, and you have seen that. That has got to be very difficult for you personally.
Well,
why continue working the site?
On Wednesday, I was actually involved with the rescue of a female who was alive, and that lifted my spirits, obviously. We were able to find someone alive and rescue her and save her life. And I'm convinced that there are still people in there. There's a tremendous void, some of which you could actually walk into. There's a hope. We're hoping that many of these people were fortunate enough to land into these voids, and the rubble that was coming down around them was actually, the steel that surrounded them actually sheltered them from the remaining debris. That's what we're looking for. Obviously, our window of opportunity is decreasing as time goes by, but if we can somehow get into the towers and make a deeper push to some of the sub-levels, I think we will find some people alive.
Kenny, thank you for talking to us, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Paula, as you can see, an extraordinary story, one of the many stories of heroism here. Not just one firefighter, but 3. Just not all of them made it. Back to you.
Thanks, Michael. As you're standing there, I just want to tell a quick story about some of the firefighters I met this morning on the way into work. They came in from the Los Angeles Fire Department, and in fact, on Tuesday, one of them had been in touch with a New York firefighter that gave them a description of what it was like to go into the debris, described it as walking into a tornado, followed by the sensation of trying to ride a wave in heavy surf. And fortunately, that one fire department official from New York did survive the collapse of the first tower. So the stories that you're sharing with us, Michael, today are unfortunately stories that are repeated over and over again. Okay, Michael, thanks so much. We will check back in with you a little bit this morning. If you look at the far right-hand corner of the screen, you can see the Dow is down 545 points at this hour. The NASDAQ down 103 points. Joining me right now is Maria Ramirez. Maria Ramirez. You don't want to say that really fast. Who has some insights into the 1/2 point rate cut today and what the markets might be doing. For starters, let's talk about the rate cut. Lou Dobbs reported early this morning it was expected, and he doesn't expect it to move the markets all that much today. Well, what do you think?
I do think that as of Friday, the 50 basis points rate cut that the Fed just announced this morning was pretty much priced into the market. But I think that more than what the Fed has done is what the Fed is likely to do and what we're likely to get as a stimulus to the economy that might be more important than interest rate cuts.
And that would be what?
And that would be, I think, government spending, fiscal spending that you have, I think, locally and at the federal level, because we know that the tax cut so far hasn't really done much. But I do think that the additional stimulus in spending, although it might be more located right here, certainly is going to help the economy to revive itself.
Can you even begin to imagine what kind of debate that will be on Capitol Hill? I mean, obviously, no one wants the United States to go in a recession, but at a time when there's a battle over the Social Security Trust Fund and Medicare and Medicaid, you can imagine that is going to be, there will be a lot of bloodletting, no?
Well, I do think that all those issues are in the back burner right now because I think people are worrying more about the short term, and I think that the cohesiveness that we have in Washington right now, I think throughout the nation, in terms of the spirit, it's very much unified. I think that the disagreement that they would have had a week ago, really, sort of history right now, because I think that the primary thing right now is to get things sort of upstarted and united in a united effort on all fronts. So I do think that there's pretty much a clear way. Whatever needs to be spent, it's going to be spent, and then we'll take care of that after, other issues after.
I didn't get to say this in the introduction to you, but you, of course, are an economist, but you also happen to be a World Trade Center survivor. Where were you on the day of the attacks?
Well, at 8:30 in the morning, I had a meeting at 2 World Trade Center, visiting one of our clients on the 55th floor of 2 World Trade Center. And of course, as everybody stated, about 10:02, I heard a loud thundering noise. I thought it was something on top of the building, but immediately there were things flying around on fire, like paper on fire and metal. So I made my way down to the 38th floor, walked through the staircase, but it wasn't moving very fast. So I took an elevator, something that you probably shouldn't do, but my gut instinct was that the elevators were probably working, and there was an express elevator to the first floor. I crossed the street, went into our building, which our office is on 1 Liberty, and as soon as I walked into our building, then the other plane came, and of course the rest is pretty disastrous.
Basically what you're saying, your life was saved by doing something that every investigator tells you not to do.
Right.
If you hadn't gotten out at that point,
and exactly when
the collapse of the building
that's
didn't
right.
follow that far after.
The problem was that when I got to the first floor of the building, basically security was saying that everything was safe in the building, which it was because nobody knew what was going on, and to calm down. But my instinct was that you shouldn't be calm, you should run away from a disaster, and I ran down the pace, actually, the school that I went to, and I stayed in the library, and as soon as I walked into the building, then one of the buildings came down. Of course, there was mass pandemonium, and you couldn't see anything outside, but I'm glad I followed my instinct. I think most of the people did, and I think that for those that had their instincts and couldn't get out, it's a horrendous tragedies that I think will affect all of us, either if we were there or not, the rest of our lives.
You are one lucky woman. Come back to the psyche of the folks in our massive audience who are investing today. They're looking at these numbers. The Dow now found down 580 points, the NASDAQ down 103. What's the best piece of advice you can leave those investors with today?
I think it's you stay put. The market right now is in a free fall. I think the U.S. economy is resilient, and I think that we'll come out of whatever problems we have. We still are the best place in the world, I think, economically speaking. So I think that even this is something that will come through okay. But I do think that the best thing to do is to stay put and not to panic, because probably that's what people will like us to see on the other side of our enemies, basically.
What is your reaction to what Treasury Secretary Paul O'Neill told Lou Dobbs on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange? Quote, we will set records in the not too distant future.
I hope
some would
so.
say, and I've heard some of the experts out here this morning say he's smoking something. Is he being overly optimistic?
Well, I think that it's good for us to be optimistic. I do think that...
But overly optimistic is a salient word.
I think that the last time we went through a recession, it was 2 quarters, and the financial system in the U.S. was really in bad shape. The financial system is in good shape. I think U.S. companies are generally in good shape. The U.S. consumer, I think, even though we've seen some bad numbers, I think that we'll have not a long, drawn-out recession. I think we have a couple of quarters probably negative growth, and the second quarter might have been negative already. Third quarter doesn't look that great, but I don't think it's going to be a long malaise that we used to have in the old cycles, where the recessions to be a lot steeper, a lot longer.
Maria Ramirez, thank you very much
Paula.
for joining us this
Good to be
morning.
with
We
you.
appreciate your
Thank you.
perspective. Let's go back to Lou Dobbs, who is standing by on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange with Christine Roman. Hey, Lou, talk about standing in the right place at the right time. How did you pull that off? I saw Mayor Giuliani coming to the picture, but I didn't see the governor and the other senators as they came into your circle.
Well, Senators Schumer and Clinton obviously here with Governor Pataki and Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, the governor and the mayor leading the rescue efforts and trying to get this area back. Obviously there to support this market, and Dick Grasso, the chairman. Paula, we have, by the way, a market that right now is turning decidedly more negative than when we last talked. The tick off 831. And the Dow is now off just about 570 points. The NASDAQ continues to bounce around. It's off about 100. But the word that Christine Romans, our floor correspondent here at the New York Stock Exchange, and I've been hearing for the last little while, the word is sell.
There are a lot of sell orders out there, Lou. American Express still isn't open yet, so we only have 29 of the 30 Dow components open for trade now. If American Express opens sharply lower, that means you're going to see even bigger losses on the Dow Jones Industrial Average. A lot of the airline stocks aren't open yet, and there are big sell orders there. Continental Airlines indicated down as much as $20 a share. Delta also indicated down sharply, not quite $20, but maybe $6 or $7. Defense stocks, though, indicated higher, as are the drug stocks. So it's your typical defensive type buying in terms of stock market psychology that it looks like is going to play out here. All the traders, though, say wait to see what happens at the end of the day. You got 4 days of nervousness. You know, a big sell-off was expected. We just have to see what investors do after that.
And Christine, Paula, we're also, our volume right now is almost 333 million shares. We've been open just a little over a half hour. Typically what we've been having here is a volume on a, well, certainly midday, midweek, a little over a billion, sometimes less than that in either Mondays or Fridays, right?
You know, this is the time of year when we start to have volume come back because it's September. It's also 4 days with the market closed. There's everyday buying, selling that still needs to be done from last week, plus all of this uncertainty in the market. Traders here are telling me they expect a big volume day here, Lou, simply because, you know, there's a lot of pent-up demand to buy and sell stocks, and because of what's happened in the last week. They expect it to be $2 billion plus.
Do you think it's fair to say that what we're watching here today, even though we've got a dramatic downturn in the Dow Jones Industrials, which is, by the way, I believe this is the lowest intraday dip ever, 575 points, not on a percentage basis, but in absolute points, it looks like an orderly market.
It is a very orderly market here overall. We haven't hit any triggers, obviously, in the Dow. You've got a lot more to go before any kind of circuit breakers will come into play. And traders are saying that they are ready to go back to work. They're fully staffed. They've been sitting there. They also point out that there's a lot of money on the sidelines. So maybe you're going to have people coming in, bargain hunting a bit. You know, maybe this is the time to come. Maybe this is that capitulation everyone's been talking about. Who knows?
Well, it certainly is in the first less than an hour as something of a capitulation. And to give you some sense of just how dramatic this sell-off is, GE, which is, if there is a blue chip, certainly GE is the blue chip, when it was last off just about $4 a share. So when you see that kind of pressure in the first 45 minutes of trading on a company like that, it's a good indicator of the pressure.
Yeah, Boeing is lower as well. United Technology is lower. There's some big names trading very sharply lower here today. And the Dow only 19 points above the 9,000 mark. So we are below the lowest intraday level of 2.5 years, Lou, for this market today.
Christine, Andy Serwer, Fortune magazine is also with us, and I'd like to just turn to you, Andy. We've got this environment. It's awfully difficult. No, it's impossible to make anything of a market in the first hour of trading, but we have just gone below the previous decline of 585. We're now down 628 points. What is your sense of what we can expect here, Andy?
Well, you know, Lou, it's anyone's bet at this point. The trading strategies are all over the place, so we do know that a drop of 1,100 points in the Dow would prompt a 1 hour halt in trading at the NYSE. We're a ways away from that, and it's hard to imagine that we'd hit it, although I should say, again, who knows at this point. You know, I spoke with Michael Price, who's a legendary trader, and he suggested that he thought the Dow might even be up at the end of the day. Hard to believe at this point, Lou, but you and I both know how dramatically things can shift even in an ordinary type of day, and this is no ordinary day.
Exactly. And Christine, as we look here at about 623 points off on the Dow, what's your thought? Are we going to see it bounce around here, or is the direction set? How's that for putting you on the spot?
Yeah, thanks, Lou. I think the direction is set for today. I think 600 points is something that's very difficult to overcome in the very first few minutes of trading here. Traders were saying that the path of least resistance was lower even before this tragedy on Lower Manhattan. So now this added uncertainty only inspires the sellers here today. We have to just see if it remains an orderly market. A lot of people have been telling me over the past few days, nobody makes money in a panicky market by selling. You make money by keeping your long-term view. And they say, just as they did 2 weeks ago when people were worried about the market at 3-year low for the S&P 500, know why you own your stocks, know what your long-term view is, and don't deviate for that for short-term reasons.
We're watching some huge blocks in both Bank of America and Home Depot. We also just saw large blocks going over in GE. Now, those are highly liquid stocks, a lot of shares. What do you make of that?
Well, it's to be expected with the market closed 4 days. You got a lot of buying and selling, as I said, the daily kind of stuff that mutual funds do. As well, those are our very highly liquid stocks. GE, remember, came out and warned this weekend on its quarter, taking 4 cents off its number because of an insurance company it owns. It expects to lose some money because of this World Trade Center bombing. So a warning from GE, a big dog on Wall Street, one of the big stocks traders like to buy. It is the most actively traded stock here. No surprise there.
Okay, Andy, let me put you on the spot as well. You think the direction is set?
Yeah, I agree with Christine. I think it's going to be hard to overcome it. I think anyone who thinks we're going to end up in plus territory may be dreaming. Lou, just a point here. The largest Dow drop in point terms was 617 April of 2000. So just to give you a sense of how substantial the drop is today, and we could break that mark, of course, easily.
And I'd love to jump in here with all three of you, Lou and Christine, as you talk about some of these stocks that have suffered some major drops. It makes one wonder if some of them were overpriced to begin with.
That's a great point, Paula. Did you hear that, Christine? I wanted to make sure. Paula was asking if perhaps these stocks were overvalued to begin with. And I'll give you first. I'm going to give you first Christine's answer, and then I'll answer if I may, Paula.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, this market, by earnings guidelines, was definitely overvalued to begin with, but a lot of these stocks are trading near 52-week lows, and some folks are telling me that with so much negativity already built into some stocks, there might not be much more to go on the downside.
Paula, if I may, Andy, just jump in here real quickly and answer that question from at least my perspective. When we talk about overvaluation, that's always subjective, and the market makes the determination ultimately. The market is making a very important determination today. I think your point, Paula, is exact. We still hadn't had the full correction in some of these values, and you price that into today's activity, and you see some further weakness. It is not simply a reaction just to the last 4 days that the market was closed. But the one thing that I truly believe this, markets are never, ever wrong. And this market, however it ends, whether it ends as both Andy and Christine suggest, down from here, or even a remote possibility perhaps, but still a possibility that it end higher, the market is really working. And that's what's critical.
All right, you two, just one last question for Andy, who sits beside me with the market down 598 points now. What about gold? What are we hearing about those trades?
Well, gold has been way up over the past couple days, getting towards that magical $300 price. It hasn't gotten there yet. It's around $290. But, this has always been a real bugaboo. When we see panic, when we see turmoil, the price of gold goes up, and of course it's been up. But it's really not a great long-term strategy. Over the past 20, 30 years, the price of gold has gone absolutely nowhere. And for people who are thinking of selling stocks now and buying gold, I would suggest that it might be more prudent to sit on the sidelines. One other point I just want to make, Paula, and Lou sort of touched on this too, I think a little bit, is that what we're forgetting here, one thing we may be forgotten, is that the markets are working. That was a huge concern, that there'd be all sorts of disruptions, the telephones wouldn't work, the computers wouldn't work. Sure, the market's down 500 or 600 points, but it is orderly. It is working. There are no malfunctions. A few stocks haven't opened, but that happens all the time anyway. And so I think we really should be thankful that the system is back.
All right. Thanks so much for that update, Andy. Right now, we're going to head back to Washington, D.C., where John King stands by with an important interview. Hi again, John.
Hello again to you, Paula, and an important interview indeed. Joining us in Atlanta studios today, the Speaker of the House, Dennis Hastert, a key voice as the U.S. government decides how to respond to these terrorist attacks, not only as the President mulls his military options, but with the events unfolding up on Wall Street this morning. Mr. Speaker, thank you for joining us. Let me ask you first, good morning to you, sir. As you see the developments in the market today, obviously a great deal of anxiety on Wall Street, here in Washington as well, about how these terrorist strikes will impact the U.S. economy. What is your thinking on that, sir, and specifically what can and might the U.S. Congress do to help?
Well, there's two things we need to do. First of all, I talked to Leader Gephardt yesterday and a couple days ago that we need to try to look over the horizon right now. We need to find what the right formula is to sustain and give this market the shoring and people the confidence that this market's there. You know, the American people are great people. We're a resilient people. Our markets are resilient. This is kind of like us old people sitting back and watching the kids ride the roller coaster. We don't know what's going to come to the bottom, what's going to happen when they start up again. But we need to do some mix, whether it's capital gains or investment tax credits, some type of thing to shore up this market, to give people the confidence that they need to invest, that that's the best investment that folks can make. And there is a lot of money on the sidelines. People have cashed out a lot of things, and those dollars are there. We need to give the people the confidence that this country is going to move forward, and they have the investment and financial future before them.
Help our viewers, sir, understand to what degree is there coordination? The Federal Reserve cut key interest rates by 0.5 point just before the markets open, obviously designed to help infuse some confidence in the markets. The President and other administration officials speaking not only to yourself and other key members of Congress, but to banks and investment houses and key leaders around the world. Explain, if you can, the detail of coordination here, as the administration obviously and the Congress has concerns about the economy.
Well, right now, the last couple of days, we're trying to just keep this country going, and we haven't talked a lot about markets, but I did talk to, I said to Leader Gephardt, we're having a meeting this week with key economists and folks from the market and the administration to lay out what our strategy is. We hope to move some legislation either this week or next week to lay the foundation for that. We're also concerned about the airline industry, and we started last week, or just Thursday night, to try to move some legislation that shores up the airline industry short term, especially for the loss in passengers that they've suffered the last couple of days. And of course, they're a cash flow industry. We need to make sure that America keeps flying, because that's very, very important to keep this country going.
Another package of legislation coming your way will come from the Justice Department and Attorney General Ashcroft. He wants new powers for wiretappings to track money laundering and terrorist groups. Most supportive so far, but many raising questions about civil liberties here. In your view, specifically with regards to this package, but much more broadly as well, will Americans have to give up some freedoms now in the name of improved security?
Well, trying to keep the balance on civil liberties is really the important issue. I've said for a long time, money launderers in this country are really the cause of a lot of the drug problems we have, and we know that Osama bin Laden has got a lot of the money from the drug trade across Central Asia and other places, and money launderers are the way that he gets the dollars in his pocket that he has to spend to perpetrate these types of things. So we need to be able to crack down on money launderers. I think we need to have new powers in that area. Those other issues we'll take one by one, go through our judicial committees, and try to make sure we have the right balance.
Mr. Speaker, you are being repeatedly updated by the administration, not only the status of the investigation, but I want to ask you this question, sir, as our viewers here in the United States and around the world watch. When you get intelligence briefings from the administration, what are they telling you about the current threat? Do they believe there is still a risk of terrorist attack here in Washington and around the country?
Well, I think we need to be prudent. We don't know what that risk is. We think most of those people have been watched, and we know where their whereabouts are. Some of them are being apprehended as we speak, but you never know. And I think every American needs to be somewhat prudent. But we think that risk has turned down. Terrorism is, first of all, a strike, and then they play off of everybody's fears after that. We need to be brave, we need to move forward, but we also need to be prudent.
As the President mulls his military options, a week or so ago, sir, and this may seem a little bit in poor taste, but a week or so ago, the great debate in Washington was about dipping into the Social Security surplus and where did the big federal budget surplus go. As you look now at the things the administration is asking for the investigation, for the recovery effort, no doubt in your mind, obviously, that we will have to dip into Social Security spending here. Any sense at all of the impact of that on the U.S. government's financial situation?
Well, we have to do the fiscal and monetary things that are the right things to do. Any first-year economics students will tell you that. We passed a $40 billion bill on Friday to give the President, first of all, the ability to carry out his war against the folks that perpetrated this crime. The second thing we did was to make sure that we have the things in place for FEMA so that they can continue to take care of the victims and clean up the aftermath of this. We're also looking to make sure that we have the dollars in place so that we can put on the security for our air travel across this country. Those things are taking some of those dollars. And then, of course, $20 billion there to help the cleanup and the trauma that's happened in New York City. We don't know if that's the iceberg or just the tip of the iceberg. But the real issue is we need to give the president the powers and his ability and the dollars to be able to go out and smoke these people out of their shadows.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to close by asking you finally about your personal thoughts. After the vice president, you are next in the line of succession to the presidency. And in Washington, when they realized there was this threat of terrorist attack, and indeed sites in Washington targeted, you were spirited away to a secret location outside of Washington to a secure bunker. Explain to us your thoughts and exactly what happened to you as all this unfolded last Tuesday.
Well, first of all, I was in my office early. We heard the first damage to the World Trade Center, and everybody thought it was an accident. And then when the second one happened, we knew it wasn't. And then, of course, I looked out my window, and the smoke and flames were coming out of the Pentagon. At that point, I decided that the prudent thing was to adjourn Congress and to let everybody go. And we were going to move to the floor to adjourn. And at that time, we had several of our, not Secret Service, but U.S. Capitol Police whisked me away as we were flying in a helicopter skirting Washington, looking down at that smoke that was moving over Northern Virginia, flames and smoke coming out of the Pentagon. I thought I'd never see that ever in my lifetime. You know, the Capitol had never been moved out of, except for the War of 1812 when it was burnt. That certainly is the symbol, and it made you sick at heart. But yet, you know, when we came back that night, and the four leaders stood in front of 100 or 200 members of the Congress, and we stood shoulder to shoulder on a bipartisan basis, and we're going to see this thing through with the administration, the president, and the American people. And members behind us broke out spontaneously, and God Bless America sent a shiver down my spine, and a resolve that we will see this through, and we're going to stand together all as Americans until it's over.
All right, the Speaker of the House, Dennis Hastert, joining us today from our studios in Atlanta. We thank you very much, sir, for your time at these very trying times. Thank you very much again. We hope to speak to you soon. And now, back to Paula Zahn in New York.
John, I'm not going to let you get away so soon. I wanted to ask you about a couple of things that Mr. Hastert touched upon with you. He talked about Congress's concern about the health of the airline industry, and touched upon a short-term bailout that is being debated right now. Is that something that's likely to have major support for?
Yes, indeed it does have major support, Paula. It was held up over the weekend, we understand, by the objection of one or two lawmakers who did not want it being considered in the middle of the night. It came up overnight after midnight. The Congress was considering it, and we know Representative Lloyd Doggett, a Democrat of Texas, among those who said, if this is a package that has such support, why don't we debate it in the daylight? But this is a package backed by the president, backed by the Democratic leaders in the House and the Senate, backed by the Speaker as well. It's about $2.5 billion in direct aid to the airline industry, and then some various government loan guarantees that I believe total in the area of another $15 billion. So this package likely to move when the Congress comes back to work on Wednesday, likely to move it in several days after that.
The House Speaker also urged Americans for the need to invest, and said this, in fact, is the best investment they can make in the economy, you know, to sort of not lose patience with their investments. But, John, you've probably heard a couple of economists repeating over and over again how important it's going to be to get the government to spend during this period of time. How will that push affect the budget battles?
Well, the government certainly will be spending on the unfortunate nature of this crisis, the rescue and recovery effort, the investigation, a military buildup that is underway. But certainly, as you heard the Speaker said, they are debating other things. There was to be this very week, a big partisan debate over was the president squandering the surplus? Was the tax cut too big? Instead, now you have bipartisan agreement, and there will be some disagreements along the way over the specifics, make no doubt about it, but bipartisan agreement that there should be government spending, that the president and the recovery effort should get all the money it needs for that. And there's even a debate now about another round of tax cuts, something like a capital gains tax cut that would help the markets. This is a remarkable attitude and cooperative spirit here in Washington right now. There will be some bumps along the road, no question. Some worried that in this atmosphere of crisis the Congress might go too far, but look for more government spending in the short term and look for the possibility of at least another targeted tax cut.
From a New York perspective, it's been interesting to watch some of the comments Senator Clinton has made in the last couple of days, and Senator Schumer. They're giving the president a great deal of credit for answering their call for support, not for just those victimized here, but those victimized in Pennsylvania and in Washington. How long do you think this bipartisan show of unity can last?
Well, that is significant and legitimate question, certainly as long as you see the moving pictures that you are so much closer to up in New York, and as long as just across the Potomac here, you see the pictures over at the Pentagon. Everyone agrees the reaction so far has been heartwarming and bipartisan. Certainly for the foreseeable future, we see no change in that at all. Again, there will be some disagreements along the way, but there is always in the country a rally around the president movement at times of crisis, and Democrats and Republican alike saying his phone line has been open, his advisors have been helpful. Senator Schumer saying when the initial proposal was $20 billion in short-term spending, he said, look, Mr. President, that's just enough for New York. And the president said, you got it. And they doubled that in a matter of minutes. So the president drawing praise right now, and they do understand at the White House, this is a president in office fewer than 9 months now. The eyes of the nation on him, indeed the eyes of the world on him, a defining moment for the country and a testing moment for this president.
John, I know you were in the process of interviewing Speaker Hastert when the market dropped down to, what, 514 points. Have you gotten any response from the White House directly to what is going on right now on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange?
In good times and bad times, and even now in the worst of times, the White House refusing to comment specifically on the movements of the markets. The White House Press Secretary Ari Fleischer telling reporters a short time ago that, and it's a standard line at the White House, that the fundamentals of the U.S. economy remain strong, that the president and his senior economic team, and by the way, the president will meet with them this afternoon to discuss the day's events in the markets, that the White House believing the fundamentals are strong. The White House does not comment on specific market moves, nor does it comment on the specific moves of the Federal Reserve. Behind the scenes, they were encouraged, though, that Chairman Greenspan and the Fed cut rates today, and they believe that this first day might be the worst day, and that after that, the markets will stabilize and hopefully, in the views of the administration, rally in the days ahead.
Okay, John, I only have time for one last question. The other thing that caught my ear in your interview with Speaker Hastert is you asked a very direct question about whether the United States continues to be at risk for another terrorist attack, and his answer was, quote, we don't know what that risk is. Give us your perspective on that, and what other members of Congress are saying.
Well, in briefings, intelligence briefings and the investigative briefings, the members of Congress are being told that there are believed to be still in this country small terrorist cells, people affiliated, aligned with, and associated with those believed responsible for these attacks. That's why we have seen the warrants issued for material witnesses, the FBI saying this is an unprecedented investigation. One of the concerns raised early on was that if the president had decided to act immediately and, say, launch cruise missile strikes against sites in Afghanistan, bin Laden camps in Afghanistan, that there were still terrorists running around the United States who might respond by going after major population centers. So quite a bit of tension in the investigative ranks. No one saying at this moment, based on our information, there are any specific threats, any credible specific targets right now, but there is still a fear of a risk of a continuing terrorist attack.
All right, John, we'll be with you throughout the rest of the morning. We get just about an hour and a half left before noon. Thank you, John. Right now we're going to check in with Greg Clarkin, who joins us for the NASDAQ market site. NASDAQ down some 84 points. The reaction from there, Greg?
And Paul, I'll tell you right now, in the first 60 minutes of trade, at least, the market's really behaving as many folks anticipated and really expected. We saw a big burst of selling at the open of the markets, and then on the NASDAQ, at least, things have really stabilized. What we saw is the composite down better than 100 points for much of the last hour. Right now, the composite is down about 83 points. 1611 is the level. Now, we have to tell you, though, in terms of decliners and advancers, for every one stock that is making ground today, we're seeing 5 stocks losing ground. Among the biggest losers, as expected, the airline stocks. The ones that trade here on the NASDAQ include SkyWest. That is down almost 41% at the moment. We have Mesa Airlines down almost 42%. And then Priceline.com, the online travel operation where you can pretty much name your own price for a flight, that is also being hammered today. It's down 40%. Actually, we have found a few winners, though. One of the biggest percentage gainers today, Envision Technologies. And these are folks that make systems, explosive detection systems used in airports to detect explosives and baggage. That stock, take a look at it, up 195%. We had seen that stock up better than 200% a few moments ago. So some of those companies that folks believe will stand to see increased business out of this tragedy gaining ground today. But overall, though, Paul, make no mistake about it, we are seeing a lot of downside selling pressure. And this is really where things get a little tricky. Again, the markets kind of did as expected. They sold off after 4 days of downtime, a lot of pent-up demand to sell. So that was taken care of. A lot of big institutional investors, the folks that run those portfolios, the money managers and the like. They had been quoted over the weekend as saying that they were going to sit out the open, see where things were going before they got involved in the market. So this, again, is kind of a critical point, and folks are going to be watching the action of the market, between now and noon at least, very, very carefully today to get some sense as to where this thing may go for the rest of the day. Right now, Paula, down about 82 points, 1613 is the level. Back to you.
All right, Greg, let's go back to a point you were making earlier on about the airline stocks and some of those stocks dropping. Speaker Hastert, in an interview with John King, just talked about wanting to move forward the legislation Congress is considering for a short-term bailout. Is that likely to have any impact on what the stocks do today?
In the immediate term, Paul, I was listening to that interview. I was watching the stocks behind me here on the wall to see if there was any, short-term reaction. Sometimes things like that will be broadcast, maybe hit the wires, you get a little pop. There was no reaction. So at the moment, at least, until the airline industry gets a better sense as to, how the progress is being made on that front, you're likely to see this increased selling pressure on these stocks, especially the smaller airlines. Those are the ones that are particularly vulnerable. The airlines were in a tough business environment to start with before this tragedy, and this tragedy is expected to be kind of a death knell for some of the smaller airlines. So those folks very vulnerable. And again, the airline industry, investors are really going to want to get a better sense of progress on that front, real tangible progress, probably before we start to see a corner being turned for some of those stocks.
All right, thanks so much, Greg. See you a little bit later on in the day. Let's go back to Lou Dobbs, who rejoins us from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Lou, I wanted to ask you a question with something that Anders Sewer and I were talking about from Fortune magazine, and he was sort of making the point that the European markets also dropped 5% and then they stabilized. Do you think it's possible that might happen with U.S. markets today? Are you all but certain that's not going to happen?
Well, as you heard our colleagues, Andy Serwer and Christine Romans, they think the direction is set. They have a lot of support for those views, with the up volume running just about an eighth of the down volume with these indexes. But the indexes are improving, as you're seeing there, Paula. We have seen the tick go down into the minus 300, still negative without question, but that's off about negative 1,200. That's an indication of leading trades, and it suggests that we have at least some abating of the weakness for at least a short period of time in this market. So I'm personally not willing to say that this market will finish down at all. There's just too much uncertainty, and I would disagree with Brian about the direction of the market based on anything that happened in either Europe or Asia, for that matter. This is a unique market. It's the capital value of this market dwarfs them. Europe combined does not amount to the New York Stock Exchange. So I just think it's very difficult to take a lead from that market.
I want to continue to call attention to your multiple coup today when you were somehow able to, in the course of one interview Mayor Giuliani, Governor Pataki, Senator Schumer, Senator Clinton, and Treasury Secretary O'Neill. He made a prediction that I wanted you to react to. He said, quote, "We will set records in the not too distant future." Is that possible?
Well, I suppose one could be somewhat flippant on a day like this and point out he didn't say records to what direction, either the upside or the downside.
I noticed that, Lou. I was listening carefully. I picked up on that, too.
But, Paula, the Treasury Secretary has been bullish on this economy for some time. He remains so. He has a lot of very good company, by the way, Jack Welch, Warren Buffett, and a host of others as well. So, he has a reason for that forecast. He believes, as do many of us, in the fundamental strength of this economy. The consumer, despite everything, has stayed with this economy. We've certainly seen some signs of slight weakness here in the last month or so in a couple of areas, but the consumer's staying strong. So the Secretary of Treasury has a lot of good evidence and history on his side.
I wanted to bring up something that Chairman Grasso also told you. He said, if you bet against America, you are dead wrong. I know that on the internet, individual American investors have been encouraged to buy stock, to buy American today. Will we see any evidence of that, those small kinds of efforts to prop up this market?
Paula, I personally, and this is simply a personal viewpoint, what makes this country great and what makes these markets great is that they are markets of and an economy and a society of choice. I think that people who vote with their pocketbooks rather than their economic self-interest probably, they certainly have every right to. I support that right. I think the smartest thing for investors to do is to take the long view. The long view, by the way, means not to sell in a panic and certainly not to sell for reasons that might attend today's opening, for example, and to look to long-term value. That said, these markets, invariably, they may disappoint us, but they will also on those occasions not be wrong. So I would just say that patriotism, which I admire, respect, and join in, is probably best left to say, let's support these markets, let's keep choice open, salute the men and women who've opened these markets, and let these markets perform their just critical function in our democratic capitalist society.
Sure, I know you're imploring investors to take a long view, but Andy Serwer also told me that traditionally in October, can be a pretty tough time for investors. Take a short-term look for us.
Okay, I'll take a short-term look. Short-term, September turns out to be a worse month historically than does October. And also, history, while prologue is certainly not a definitive predictor or indicator, and certainly not determinant of what will happen, there is nothing surrounding today's historic opening of the New York Stock Exchange after being closed for 4 days that is rooted anywhere in my judgment in history. There is just no event that comes close to the cataclysm that we have experienced in this country. There is, whether one looks to the beginning of World War II, World War I, the beginning of the Korean War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, there's just nothing like it. We have very little here that, in historical terms, it suggests to me the outcome of a day's trading activity or even a week's. That said, I believe that we can confidently say that this economy and these markets have over time and a lot of time, better than 2 centuries, demonstrated that they work and work very well.
Lou, I know you can't see the monitor right now, but you're going to have a lot of competition visually today. In the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, you see the Dow and NASDAQ bug. CNN is now adding the stock ticker from our sister network, CNN-FN, to give our viewers a more complete picture of the stock market. So we will count on you for guidance throughout the day. Thank you so much for your insights right now. And again, congratulations on that sixsome that you interviewed there. That was quite stunning.
Those folks obviously here to celebrate along with the rest of us the opening of this market, and it's quite a day.
All right. Thanks so much, Lou.
Thank you, Paula.
Right now, we wanted to give you an idea of some of what's going on in New York City now as we look at the around-the-clock rescue operation underway. We have reports that some of New York's great chefs are cooking up meals for those toiling away at Ground Zero now. And not far from the wreckage site, workers can now board the cruise ship, the Spirit of New York. There they can get hot and cold meals prepared by some of New York's best restaurants. And even though the boat provides a break, we're told it is still so close to Ground Zero that you can actually see and smell the smoke from the wreckage. Let's go back to Bill Hemmer, who joins us from outside the Stock Exchange to be filled in on some of what he's heard from workers there. Hi again, Bill.
Hey, Paula, good morning once again. I can tell you in the 5 hours we've been down here, this is the quietest we have seen Broad Street. Again, just about a half block away from the front facade of the New York Stock Exchange. People at this point clearly have made their way into their offices, and they're watching along with us as we watch the markets tick away at this point, open for more than an hour at this point. The work continues, though. We've seen electrical workers down here, construction crews, again, trying to relay the infrastructure that was damaged this past week. And Paula, quickly here, I want to bring in Reno Eterno. He's with Con Edison, the main electricity supplier here in the city of New York. Reno, good morning to you. You've been here throughout the week trying to reestablish connections and cable lines. Specifically at this point, what have you been able to do?
Well, we've been setting up temporary cables throughout the area just to get them going for the temporary. Then in a few weeks, hopefully, we'll put in the permanent stuff.
When you say temporary, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's the same cable, but you wouldn't have time to dig up the streets. So we're just laying them out, boxing them up, making sure they're safe.
Okay,
so that
we're
you
on
get
Broad
power right
Street,
away.
but on Broadway, early this morning, we saw a number of streets that had already been torn up.
Yeah, we're working on that too. Some sections we are able to go in trench it out and put cables in. But it's also gas too. It's not just electric. There's a lot of stuff going down.
What are you hearing right now about how far you've gone, how much farther you may have to go from here?
It's hard to say. We hear, we're like you. We hear a few weeks of work at some points. Then you hear we might be here to January. You never know.
Well, we have not heard reports yet today about phone lines or electricity being a problem just yet, based on what you've done. What are you hearing?
No problems. They tested yesterday for the stock exchange. Everything went great. And again, we're like everyone else. Hopefully everything goes good.
Yeah, sure. And I don't mean to put you on the spot. I know you're not a supervisor and the man in charge, but what are you hearing about the buildings around here in terms of electricity, power supply, etc.?
Yeah, I know they shut off a lot of stuff for safety reasons. Haven't heard anything as far as when they're coming on.
Keep on doing a good job, okay? How do you feel being back, by the way?
I think we needed to come back as soon as possible.
Okay.
Just for everything, the country.
Good luck, Reno. Thanks. Reno Turner with Con Edison, the main electricity supplier here. Quickly here, Paula, listening to Lou Dobbs talk, I reminded yesterday of the interview that Susie Orman gave to CNN, a well-known financial analyst. She said, don't gauge this market based on what you're seeing today, but watch it tomorrow and throughout the rest of the week. Indeed, she said, one day does not a market make. We'll watch it. More coming up shortly. Paula?
Although, as you and I both know, as you watch these numbers go up and down, it's sometimes kind of hard to have that long view.
It can
Thanks,
be tough
Bill.
medicine. Indeed, you're right, Paula.
Absolutely. Okay, let's go back to Annie Serwer and Drew, Andy, a good friend now from Fortune magazine, to give you an even better perspective of what some of you investors might face in the market. Let's look at this Dow Jones intraday chart graphic. What does it show us?
Well, it shows that we had a precipitous drop at the open, right after the open actually, and we're clawing our way back a little bit. We were as much as 600 down. We're now down about 460. The NASDAQ was down over 100. We're now down only 74, and you really can't say only after some of these drops. It's better than people thought, but it ain't over yet. We got many hours to go. I've seen this, go 100-point swings in a matter of instants. So, the trend is positive right now. We were talking earlier about this being sort of a critical time where people sort of take stock after the first hour and a half of trading and then sort of develop further strategies. But I would say that the trends are good, basically.
And how about on the NASDAQ front?
And you can see there we've really come back a bit from the worst of it. So, you can't really complain. I mean, compared to what you might have anticipated today. And again, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And this is a day that is great fun to watch, really intriguing, very important in terms of the market working and functioning. And I think that's the most important thing, Paula. The market is functioning. It's working. We have had no reports of major and serious disruptions, which is a very, very encouraging sign for American investors.
And along that same note, Lou Dobbs says the market is always right.
It is always right. It's a reflection of sentiment and where people think the prices of businesses are today. And right now, airline stocks, the prices of those businesses have been severely marked down.
And everybody expected that. I mean, some of these airlines were losing anywhere from $100 million a day to $267 million a day from last Tuesday to now, as these airlines are trying to get up and running, as airports have reopened across the country.
I think of all of American industry, this is the one that is going to be impacted the most. I mean, you've seen the tremendous layoff announcements from Continental and Delta already. They're talking about possibly being bankrupt by the end of the year. Obviously, massive government intervention is going to be required here to get this business stabilized.
Yeah, and House Speaker Hastert basically told these airlines they're going to get it. We're moving that legislation along, he said, to give you some short-term relief. Is that enough to change this picture?
It could, actually. That's a very interesting point. People who are selling right now could really be selling at a bottom if a package is announced, a bailout package, a government panel to oversee these airlines. These airlines are not going to go bankrupt, Paula. We need these airlines to run this country. So in some capacity, they're going to exist, and they're going to exist as private enterprises, too.
It is always very dangerous to try to read the tea leaves in Washington, but in your mind, is it all but inevitable they're going to get this bailout?
I think they're going to get a bailout, but I also think there's going to be government oversight. I think that the government is going to get their hands in managing how this works, because it has to. There has to be a concerted effort in terms of security, in terms of flights. The number of flights probably has to drop in this country. Demand for flights may also drop because people may be concerned about flying. The whole business, and as I said before, no business will be more affected in the wake of this terrible episode than the airline business. And we really don't know how it's going to shake out.
Let's bring Lou into the discussion now. Lou, I don't know whether you could hear part of what Andy and I were just talking about, but when you look at these numbers for the airlines, and we'll look at those intraday graphics again, the trend does not seem too positive. And we were talking a little bit about Speaker Hastert in an interview early this morning, telegraphing that he's doing whatever he can to move legislation forward to bail out the airline industry. Will that be enough to turn this around?
Well, to turn around these, what in the cases of the two largest carriers, 40% declines, better than 30% decline in Northwest, no. But will they, are they necessary? Absolutely necessary to keep the airlines moving in this environment in which we're going to see further curtailments in schedules. Absolutely essential. What is the right price? That's what we're finding out in this market now, Paula.
So what is that going to do to the telemarketing industry? I know Andrew was saying that if you have fewer flights, at the same time you might have less of a demand as well. What will be the impact of this shift?
The shift, I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Yeah, I just, you just wonder if there'll be more of an emphasis on teleconferencing and other methods of doing business.
Yes, I would assume so. I know a number of companies have already gone to it. They've had to, particularly here in downtown Manhattan and Wall Street. And it's, again, efficiencies in the marketplace, whether they be within these walls here at the New York Exchange over at the NASDAQ, or whether it be in the way business conducts business at the lowest cost with the maximum effect. We're going to see a lot of it. I'm sure of that.
And one would think, Andy, there's going to be some sort of impact on the rental car industry, the train industry.
Absolutely.
The fallout, does it lead more volume to them?
Absolutely. The rent-a-cars businesses have been booming. People have been trying to get, particularly in the Northeast Corridor, back from Washington over to Boston. It's very hard to get a rent-a-car. I would think this might be a tremendous opportunity for Amtrak because people need to get around, but they may not be able to do it as readily by the airlines.
Lou, if you would, fill us in on the other stocks that are showing some volatility. You mentioned a couple blue chip stocks about a half hour ago. Does that trend continue?
It is continuing. The financials are showing a vulnerability here. We have not seen the hotels and cruise lines hit quite as hard as many had expected, and of course those analysts expecting it to be hit every bit as hard as we've seen the the airlines be hit this morning. So there's some surprise there. Great weakness, but not to the degree that we might have expected. The defense stocks, as you would expect, are rallying here. What we've seen happen in the last about 15 minutes, Paula, is the tick has bounced again. It is negative 174 as I'm talking to you right now. Again, it had been negative almost 10 times that, about 8 times that. And so we've seen some strength. Now there's a contest going on this floor. The contest is between, and rather among, those specialists who believe that this is going to be a sustained turn in this market, and they are mustering the will to hang on here rather than sell stocks. And that's what these gentlemen here to my right are doing. That's what these gentlemen to the left all around me. And we're watching this drama unfold that is the outcry market that forms the specialist market of the New York Exchange. And they're getting very, very intense about it, as you might expect, with the Dow now off 456 and the tick improving just enough and the up volume picking up just enough to allow that good old motivator in these markets, greed, to take hold.
All right, Lou, thanks so much. We will come back to you frequently to keep us abreast on what's happening down there at the Dow Jones. Andy Serworth, thank you for your time. We will rely on you as well. Let's quickly go back to Washington, D.C., where John has some news for us.
Well, Paula, one quick update. There were supposed to be at the end of this month meetings of the International Monetary Fund and World Bank here in Washington. That one set of meetings, like other recent global economic conferences that have drawn thousands of protesters, sometimes violent protesters here in Washington and around the world. The decision just made, now confirmed by CNN, to postpone those meetings indefinitely. IMF World Bank meetings scheduled to be the 29th and 30th 30th of this month here in Washington. The administration had asked for those meetings to be postponed simply because the District of Columbia Police Department, the Secret Service, the Capitol Police, all in close proximity to where those meetings would be held, so they simply did not have the resources right now to provide the necessary security for the expected protests, and they raised the concerns that if so many demonstrators and protesters were here in Washington, it would be much more easier for individuals who might have other intentions, suspected terrorists, to move about in locations near key government buildings. Paula?
On the heels of that news, I'm wondering if you're getting any new information out of the White House this morning about the efforts to build a coalition as the United States, along with some of its friendlier allies, ponder what to do about how to get whoever's responsible for these deadly attacks.
More telephone calls from both the President and Secretary of State Powell, we are told, will be made today as this effort to build the coalition continues. I had a conversation with a very senior administration official earlier this morning who said they are very encouraged right now. In public, you see the steps being taken by the government of Pakistan. In private, this official said the Saudi Arabian government has given strong promises to the United States that it will do everything it can to crack down. Mr. bin Laden is a Saudi dissident, and he gets a great deal of his funding from wealthy Saudi businessmen. So the Saudi Arabian government, we are told, promising to help as well. Indeed, Prince Bandar, the Saudi ambassador to the United States, held a meeting at his residence over the weekend, we are told, with representatives of other Arab and Middle Eastern nations trying to get them to join the U.S. effort. At the same time, we are also told by sources that the governments of Pakistan and Russia have agreed to share their intelligence information about the bin Laden organization with the United States. That information, senior administration officials say, is key as the president meets this morning at this hour with his national security team and continuing to narrow down the potential military options for a response here. Paula?
Former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger was a guest earlier this morning, and he said the role that Russia plays in this coalition, if it plays at all, and you have just acknowledged that it probably will, is critical. But he said to a certain extent that some of these Russian leaders might be getting a sense of enjoyment out of watching how the United States deals with this situation in Afghanistan. Certainly it's a crisis that the Russians are intimately familiar with.
Flashback in history, of course, the Soviet Union had what was a disastrous campaign against many of these same forces in Afghanistan. Many of the weapons supplied, much of the training done at the time, now believed to be in the hands and among the allies of Mr. bin Laden. So yes, the history books would tell us that the Soviet Union, now collapsed of course, the Soviet Union had a disastrous experience when it sent ground troops into Afghanistan. That a lesson being studied very closely right now by the Bush administration as it prepares for military options, and officials, despite that history, saying the American people need to be prepared for the likelihood, the strong possibility, that there will be a ground element, a commando element of any U.S. military response.
One last question. You said the Russians have pledged help with intelligence. How helpful would their involvement be?
Well, that is a question. It's very hard to get the specifics out of the administration right now, given the sensitivity of the military planning and given the political sensitivity around the world. Some of these governments will help publicly. Others perhaps would do so privately because it would be difficult for their own stability to do so in a public way. But we are told the Russians have had statements of support from President Putin and others. We are told as well there has been some exchange of intelligence information about the bin Laden organization, the Pakistani government, and indeed the government of India, we are told, providing that information as well. Administration officials very gratified so far by the response of almost everyone they have reached out to for help here, although they do concede the true test will come days, weeks, and perhaps even months down the road as the administration implements what the president and others say will be a sustained campaign that takes not days, not weeks, not months, but several years.
All right. See you in a little bit, John. Thanks so much. We continue to focus our efforts on what's happening in the markets today. The Dow down some 474 points. The NASDAQ down. Okay, here comes the number in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, 74. Let's check back in with Lou, who has a guest to share his perspective with us. Good morning again.
Paula, thanks. Good morning. As you say, the market holding here in a range of about 450 to 500 points off on the Dow. And I want to turn now to Brian Finnerty. Brian, are you there?
I can hear you, Lou.
Brian Finnerty, are you there?
Yes, I am, Lou. I can hear you loud and clear. Yes, can you hear
Brian,
me?
I can't hear you if you're there.
You can't hear me, John.
Brian?
Yes, Lou.
Okay, there you are.
Okay.
I apologize. As
That's
you know,
okay.
this is it's a little noisy down here
yes,
today.
Yes, it is.
are you surprised at the weakness here, or do you think that it's a little better than you might have expected?
Well, I think now the levels we're attaining right now, Lou, are a little bit better than we expected. You know, Lou, we all came in, I think it was almost like a script. Everyone said, well, we'll probably be down about 5, maybe a little more % on the opening, and then we'll see what happens. And I think, Lou, a lot of us right now are encouraged by the fact that we opened on the lows, and we've sort of traded up off those lows since the opening. So I think it's a little bit encouraging that in fact is happening. They opened them down as low, low, and now we're starting to work our way back a little bit higher. It's not a rush, but it's a gradual lifting of the stocks.
What are you going to look for here, Brian, as an indicator on the results of the day?
Well, we'd all love to see it close up on the day. I don't think that's going to be that really the key, though, Lou. I think the key is we got the markets open. It was a huge effort to get them open by Dick Grasso, the president of the NYSE, by the people at NASDAQ and all the exchanges around the world, by all the firms in concert to get the markets open technically, to get the lines working again, to get everything going. That's a big victory right there. Point number 2, Lou, as we said, the market's opened on the low, but they were trading a little bit higher, and it's very, very orderly. We had a little bit of emotion on the opening. I mean, right after, we had the moment of silence and God Bless America, there were some wild swings right there, and particularly here in the NASDAQ marketplace. But that has calmed down, and we're working higher.
All right, let's focus on what should be a considerable amount of strength in this market, and that is those corporate stock buybacks, those stock purchase plans. How significant do you think they are here? Do you think they've entered the market, or will they wait on it?
I think a lot of them are waiting, Lou. I think what happens is those buybacks get announced, and then what happens is the corporate repurchase people try to look for opportune moments. What the buybacks are used for and have historically been used for, we had a lot of them back in the '87 crash. Right. There's a lot of them going on now. They've been used for stabilization. They're not used to run the price of a stock up. As a matter of fact, as you probably know, but viewers should know, corporate buybacks are not allowed to outbid the next natural buyer, so that they cannot, in fact, run the price of a stock up. But what they can do is provide support and underlying support for some of the stocks. And I think it's a good thing that corporations that do have excess cash can do this, and that will be a big support for this marketplace right here.
Yeah. Now, Brian, I have not been counting these, but the big board, as you know, with the ticker above us here on the trading floor, it seems like there's an announcement of a stock buyback, and again, I repeat, an announcement of one by various companies coming on about, it seems like one every 3 or 4 minutes. Yes. So that could be an interesting level of support. At the end of the day, we've heard a lot of people saying, and I think in some large measure it's understandable, be patriotic, go out and buy a stock, buy 100 stocks. I will tell you straight out, I have been trying to temper that considerably, suggesting that people let the markets work the way they do best, and that's with sheer economic self-interest. That's what makes them work so well. What do you think?
I think that's a great point, Lou. One of my largest individual clients said to me this morning, Brian, the patriotic buying is a terrific thing. He goes, but fiduciary responsibility is a much better thing and will eventually be a much bigger force in the marketplace. And what that means is the big institutions and the mutual funds, they're as patriotic as you and I and all the traders and all the people in America are, but they've got a fiduciary responsibility to perform the best for the money that they're managing, which is a lot of our money and all of ours money in the big mutual funds. So they've got to do the right thing, Lou, and I think that, in fact, they are. They're looking for spots to buy certain stocks that they might like. They're looking for places to exit other stocks that they may want to get out of, and that's what's going on in the marketplace right now. And, Lou, the other thing that we should mention here is, remember a couple days ago we were talking about, well, maybe we won't allow any shorting in the marketplace. That wouldn't be patriotic. Right. I'm glad we didn't do that. We want to see the markets operate properly with short sellers, long buyers, and short coverers, and everything going on normally and properly at once. And that gives us a much more true picture of what the real marketplace is doing.
Brian, you're absolutely right. And like every every citizen of this country always has a very strong opinion about everything. You know, I want these markets to work free, but I have to tell you, I have sort of a visceral reaction against short sellers. So, you know, I would probably rewrite the law a little bit. But you're absolutely right. A free market is precisely that. And I thank you very much, Brian, for taking time to talk with us here. Before we close out, Brian, let me ask you real quickly. I've asked you for forecasts over the years. Give us your one-day forecast here at 11, almost 11:08 Eastern Time. How does this market end?
We're getting better right now, Lou. I'd love to say up on the day because I'm as patriotic as everybody else. I'm going to say down 2.5% to 3% on the day, which will be a little bit of a rally up from here.
Absolutely.
Down small, and then get ready for the big rally to come in the ensuing days.
Okay. Brian Finnerty, thank you very much. Paula, with the tick now off about 300 points, suggesting some continued weakness, but at the low side of what we had seen in terms of the indications of weakness in the market, and with the up volume running well behind the down volume by a margin of about 1 to 6, and the Dow off almost 500 points. It looks like this day is going to be interesting from beginning until close. For now, Paula, that's it from here.
All right, thanks so much, Lou. And right now, for those of you who are just joining us, we're going to take you back to what the New York Stock Exchange looked like earlier this morning before its 9:30 opening, at a time when all of the workers there inside of the building paused to honor those who have been lost, not only here, but in Washington, D.C. and Pennsylvania, and to show a sign of solidarity.
Marketplace, the green button.
And there you see signs of thumbs up saying, showing their optimism that the markets will move in the right direction. To the right of Lou Dobbs, of course, Treasury Secretary O'Neill, flanked by Hillary Clinton, Charles Schumer. 75,000 workers trying to get to work today. Many of them suggested and subjected to, in some cases, 5 or 6 police checks. Some workers wearing masks today. Even at the building that houses the stock exchange, you can still smell smoke coming from the debris site. As you know, the markets have been unstable. You can continue to check all the statistics on our screen. We will keep those up there all day long so you can follow it right alongside with us. You are looking at what continues to be a rescue operation, more than 20,000 tons of rubble taken out of here. The mayor confirming that the number of missing at the World Trade Center now comes to 4,957, 190 confirmed dead, 115 of them unidentified. We have also learned that buried underneath here is some 11.8 metric tons of gold worth an estimated $110 million and 30.2 million ounces of silver valued at $120 million. These metals were stored in vaults below 4 World Trade Center, and it belongs to either people or firms that trade future contracts on the New York Mercantile Exchange. Let's go back to Miles now for an update on what is happening on the investigative front. Hi, Miles.
Hello again, Paula. Here are the latest developments this morning in the heart of the financial world. It is back to business time with new blood pumping through it. Before Wall Street reopened this morning, the Federal Reserve cut short-term interest rates by 0.5 percentage point. The move is to help pump life into an economy that's headed for recession. With the major stock exchanges reopening for the first time since Tuesday's attacks, stocks fell sharply. The Dow was down more than 500 points in early trading. The Nasdaq more than 85. Afghanistan has less than 72 hours to hand over suspected terrorist Osama bin Laden or face possible U.S. military attack. A high-level Pakistani delegation delivered that message to Afghanistan's ruling Taliban today. The U.S. considers bin Laden the prime suspect in last week's attacks. But not all Pakistanis support the government. Some 400 members of a radical Muslim youth group held an anti-American protest earlier in Peshawar. The dogged search continues for those responsible for Tuesday's attacks. Authorities have issued 2 new arrest warrants for material witnesses. Those sought have not been named and no other details were released. 2 other witnesses are already in custody. Also, the FBI searched an apartment yesterday in Delray Beach, Florida. It is linked to suspected hijacker Saeed Al-Ghamdi, who was on board that United flight that crashed into a farm field in Pennsylvania. Authorities believe another suspected hijacker may have lived in the same complex. And hope is pushing hundreds of rescuers to dig through the rubble in New York City in search of survivors in Lower Manhattan. The number of missing in the World Trade Center attacks has been revised downward to 4,097. Officials confirm 190 deaths, and no survivors have been found now since Wednesday. Still, Mayor Rudy Giuliani says the rescue operation will continue until all hope is gone. Turning now to someone who knows quite well the landscape, the obstacles, and the people in the Afghan-Pakistan region, retired U.S. Air Force General George Harrison. General Harrison, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Just before we bring up the graphic here, your sense of this region as a whole, it'd be difficult to find a region of the world that is more remote than this.
Well, clearly, this will be a different kind of an operation than we experienced in the Gulf War. That was very open terrain, very easy to get at terrain, difficult logistically, of course. But in this case, we have line of sight difficulties. We have all kinds of problems finding specifically what we're going for. I think the graphic you have coming up will illustrate quite clearly that difficulty.
Let's bring it up right now, as a matter of fact. If we can put that on the screen here and take a look. This was done by Dave Hennon in our Weather Center, who gave us a 3D view of here we go, if we can bring that up, and this should zoom me down into the weeds, if you will, as I push this button here, and it does not appear to be working. As we try to get this to work, General, what you have is you have a mountain pass, a significant mountain pass called the Khyber Pass, which leads into Kabul, and it is, there we go, I must have been pushing the wrong button. I'm not a weather guy. Here's the basic lay of the land here, and we should point out that Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan leadership there today indicated some interest in perhaps allowing this to be staged, a staging point for U.S. warplanes, if that ever came to that. But as we get closer to Kabul here, let's talk about what the options are for bombing. It's very limited because of the terrain and because of the difficulty identifying targets, correct?
Well, I think that the planners who are currently working, as we all know in the Pentagon, figuring out the options for all these kinds of things are well aware of these difficulties, and they're probably going to end up spending a lot of time developing backup plans because there's a high probability for misidentification, non-identification, error. And I think they understand, I know they understand very clearly how complex this operation is going to be.
And when you get to identifying targets, I've heard between 12 and 18 camps may be run by the Al-Qaeda organization, Osama bin Laden's organization. Identifying those camps, is that something that can be done with satellite reconnaissance, or is it more important perhaps to have human resources on the ground in those mountains?
Well, I think your question illustrates how difficult and how complex this entire situation is. We can't depend on photographs, we can't depend on electronic intelligence, we can't depend on technical intelligence. We're going to have to spend a lot of time developing the human side of this operation, and it's going to be a long, drawn-out, very complex operation.
Now, let's talk a little bit, and once you identify those 12 to 18 sites, let's say, for the sake of just a discussion here, the what next is not so simple either. Just going in and dropping a bomb isn't necessarily the solution, is it?
Well, that's obviously right. Depending on the effect that you want to accomplish, taking out an individual or a group of individuals may or may not accomplish exactly what we're interested in. We may have to worry about infrastructure, logistics. We may have to worry about command and control systems. Clearly, this group or coalition of terrorists have a very sophisticated command and control system, and that's going to have to be dealt with. Obviously, if you deal with just one individual, you're going to end up with a replacement for that individual, and the network's still in place. And the network is the key to this.
All right, and I'm going to ask if we could bring up that two-dimensional map of the region, and as we get that map up, I want to ask you this. This is going to require a lot of surreptitious activity, human intelligence, long-term. Things perhaps might happen that we'll never even hear about. Does that jive with the political realities of today, the desire for some sort of public display of revenge?
Well, I think the public does want a display of revenge, and they want something overt and something that's going to happen very quickly. But I think it's clear when you look at the size of Afghanistan that we're not going to do this in a very quick fashion. It's going to be a very long, drawn-out operation. It's going to require a lot of development of the infrastructure and the understanding of what's going on, and it's not going to be just a military operation. We can't do this with a quick, feel-good military strike. It's going to be a long, drawn-out, total government, total coalition operation.
Let's talk just briefly, let's orient people on the region here. If you had an aircraft carrier out here, for example, the distances from here just to the border is about 400 miles. All the way up to Kabul is at least 700 miles. Now, you have a lot of experience flying F-16s. That's pretty much the outer edge of the unrefueled mission, which means refueling or perhaps staging somewhere else. That gets really complicated, doesn't it?
That's obviously correct. We have to stage the tankers from somewhere. All of our tankers are land-based, the long-range tankers are land-based. So you have to have tankers based at some land facility. They have to have the range to get into the central portion of Afghanistan so that the fighters or the attack aircraft can refuel on the way in. Now, if you use long-range aircraft from the United States, that's certainly an option with the B-2, the B-1, B-52, those kinds of things. But that means that you have a very limited sortie capability since you have a 20 or 24-hour long sortie operation.
In other words, you have to plan things so far in advance and that kind of thing. And of course, when you're talking about B-52s, or I suppose the B-2 might be an exception to this, you're up higher generally. The B-2 being stealthy puts you down lower, maybe on more specific targets, not necessarily?
Actually, the B-2 is also a high-altitude aircraft.
Now, if what we hear is true, Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan up here, if they were to help out, that drastically changes the capability. If you could stage aircraft there, for example.
Well, it does, but of course you don't just move into a strange location like Uzbekistan or Turkestan and begin to operate. You have to develop again the infrastructure that supports you there. And if this turns into much more than an air operation, which I suspect it will, you have to have the logistics to support more than just airplanes. You have to have ground force support. You have to have all those kinds of things that we're used to dealing with.
When we bring up the term ground troops in this, I think many of us conjure up images of, sort of a Normandy-style invasion, that kind of thing. Lots of troops going in. Is there any scenario that you can come up with that would have that sort of presence, or would it be more likely special forces type of operations?
Well, of course, I'm not a ground forces expert by any means at all, but I think that the transformation of the Army over the last decade has led them to develop capabilities that give them more than just a frontal assault capability with infantry. So I think you'll see the U.S. Army being a lot more imaginative than maybe we conventionally think of them. And I'm sure that they will develop different ways to do that. Special forces are clearly an option. All of those kinds of things will be planned by the Joint Staff in the months ahead.
You get the sense that this is not the kind of scenario that the U.S. military really was designed to fight against.
Well, it's certainly not the kind of thing that we have thought about for the last couple of decades, but I think that we have a flexible enough force and enough capability that we can adapt, and I'm sure that adaptation is going on right now in the Joint Staff and the service staffs.
Is there enough flexibility with the tools that we have in our toolbox to really accomplish the sorts of missions you lay out here?
Not in the short term. Not in the short term. This is not a 1 month or 2 month response operation. This is going to be a very long-term operation.
All right. General George Harrison, United States Air Force, retired now at the Georgia Tech Research Institute right here in Atlanta. Thanks very much for spending a little bit of time with us, giving us some insights.
Thank you.
All right, let's send it up to John King, who is in Washington. John?
Thank you, Miles. One of the dominant subplots today as we track the markets opening on Wall Street and the economic reaction to last week's tragedies is the airline industry. Stocks already falling on Wall Street for the airline industry. Continental Airlines over the weekend announced it would furlough as many as 12,000 workers because of an expected downturn here in the industry. Joining me now here in Washington are Patty Davis with word of possible layoffs at America's #1 carrier.
That's right, John. American Airlines, a source there telling me today that, in fact, the airline expects to announce as early as midweek layoffs at that airline. Now, of course, that was the airline that had 2 of the hijackings, the one that crashed into the Pentagon out of Dulles and the other one into the World Trade Center. Now, the source would not give me any numbers at this point in terms of expected layoffs or an exact date for those layoffs. What the source is saying is that it is really contingent contingent upon just how bad things are, how bad it is in terms of business rebounding. The source saying, I don't think we will see a lot of people traveling. Now, as you said, that comes on top of Continental announcing 12,000 people to be furloughed. Industry in pretty bad shape, and this is evidence of it.
Over the weekend, there was an effort in the Congress to pass a bailout package, $2.5 billion in direct aid, some loan guarantees in the area of $12 to $13 billion. It was held up in the Congress. Airline CEOs trying to do anything about that?
Well, airline CEOs are coming to Washington tomorrow to meet with Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta to discuss the future of the industry. One other person at American Airlines had told me last week that they clearly welcomed any kind of bailout that the administration, that Congress can give to the airlines. They're clearly hurting. As you see, stocks today for the airlines way down. So, and they're not sure exactly in terms of rebound, in terms of the number of travelers who are going to come back. I was talking to Continental Airlines today, who said that their load factors, or the number of people traveling, way down. People are just not showing up, was the quote from a spokesperson there. So we have a possible really tough time ahead for U.S. airlines.
The theme of the day on Wall Street from the president himself is back to work, back to business, but a few miles behind us is Reagan National Airport, closed indefinitely. What about the rest of the country? Where are we in terms of getting the airline industry, commercial air traffic, back to normal?
Well, Reagan National Airport appears to be the only airport right now, the only major airport that is still closed, and that's really due to security reasons. And as you said, that is an indefinite closing. The FAA saying today that about 2,000 flights were in the air. That was as of early morning. They're updating that throughout the day. That's about half of normal. So also, a good news for commerce in the United States. Mail and cargo started moving again on passenger flights. That was as of yesterday. So things are starting to creep back to normal, but many airlines have said that they're only going to go back up, ramp up perhaps to 80% of their pre-September 11th schedules when those hijackings occurred. So they know that some bad times are ahead, and they're trying to compensate for that.
All right, Patty Davis, thank you very much for joining us here in Washington. The state of the airline industry, also one of the topics of discussion this afternoon when the president meets with his senior economic team at the White House. We'll keep you updated on those deliberations. And for now, back to Paula Zahn in New York.
All right, John, and we're going to follow your lead and talk more about what these plummeting airline stocks, what that impact might ultimately be on the flying public. Joining me right now is Tom Parsons, who is with the company bestfares.com. He joins us from Dallas this morning. Welcome. Good of you to join us, sir.
Good morning.
So I don't think any investor can be particularly happy about watching what's happening in these stocks, but you've got folks out there in the flying public scratching their heads this morning saying, what does this mean to me? Can you tell them what it does mean to them?
Actually, what it does mean to them is it looks like with the airlines actually cutting back 20% of their flights, it may mean we can get to the major airports on time in the future, but we're probably going to have to stick more on the ground up to an hour more just to go through security. I know many of the airlines are letting people make adjustments to their flight schedules. Some are offering refunds. And again, we have to look at how we're going to support these airlines. And again, I do agree that Congress probably needs to loan some money because aviation is just not fun and sun type destinations. It definitely affects all our economy.
But even if Congress comes through with this temporary bailout, when you hear that American Airlines plans to cut jobs, and you hear that Virgin Atlantic Airways has axed a fifth of its transatlantic flights, isn't the trend pretty clear that most of these companies are going to be flying less and less flights?
Oh, sure. And again, they're going to be flying less. But again, I think it's because the demand was going down in the first place before we even had this incident on Tuesday. And this is just going to be the icing on the cake. I think it's gradually coming back. We are seeing people book again. I mean, last Tuesday, all the people I talked to, they probably saw a 90% drop in telephone calls. Today, it's probably, I know in our office, it's more like a 20% drop, which is good for us, but we offer discounts. Some of these little mom and pop shops are probably also going to just disappear because, again, if the phones aren't ringing, people aren't booking flights, these folks are working on nickels and dimes. We could see the industry change very dramatically, even where you buy your airplane tickets today.
Well, let's talk about that. Given the volatility of the markets and no one sort of understanding where consumer demand will continue to go, you're offering discounts of what percent? And can you really guarantee a customer they're going to get that discount when that flight finally goes off?
Oh, sure. I mean, airlines. I mean, we're a discounter, but you got other airlines out there offering sales today. America West is offering. This was a sale beforehand. They actually have a pretty aggressive sale. Southwest is running an internet only. These airlines aren't going anywhere, but they do need the. These are the low-cost carriers in America, which are probably helping us fly. AirTrans too. So again,
all right, Tom, I'm just going to cut in here and let you know that the Department of Justice is now in the process of evacuating its workforce. We have no idea what the nature of that threat is, but CNN has confirmed that the Department of Justice is in the process of evacuating some of its buildings. As soon as we have more details available, we will bring them to you. Let's go back to Tom to get a better understanding of what consumers face in this very uncertain airline industry market. Carry on with your thought about the kinds of discounts some larger shops like your company may be able to continue to offer.
Well, again, I think today you don't need to buy an airplane ticket. Let's see how the airlines handle it. I think they'll be back to some kind of normalcy probably the next 24 to 48 hours. I think each of us have to see the skies are friendly. We have to build up our confidence again. I do believe that the international airlines, if you look at what happened with Pan Am 103 back in several years ago, we watched traffic to Europe diminish by as much as 30%. Well, again, this is probably going to hurt them even more. But again, the one way that they got us on the airplanes was offering us deals and deals. So I still think you got time to sit back and watch deals. I think the airlines are going to be very aggressive. The hotel industry is going to be affected by this too. The 4- and 5-star hotels are probably going to have to end up charging 2- and 3-star rates. The cruise lines are also going to get hurt by this, and the car rentals and the amusement parks. The whole travel industry is going to be affected, but I do believe it'll come back gradually. We just have to have the better security at the airports. I believe with these part-timers or these turnovers of 400 people a day needs to go bye-bye. I think we need to have a true forces of something that's set up by the government to make these airports secure and have educated and also well-trained and keep up with the newest techniques at those airports.
Probably find a lot of support on that one, Tom Parsons. Thank you very much for your time. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
All right, we've been following the markets all morning long. You see the NASDAQ down. Here comes the bug. Yeah, down some 81 points. Let's check back in with Greg Clarkin, who joins us for the NASDAQ market side. What else is going on there?
Well, I'll tell you, Paula, it is early on right now, but we are starting to see some positive signs on the markets, specifically concerning the tech stocks and the NASDAQ. Now, when last we spoke, the NASDAQ was down about 6% or so. It is now down 4.8%, so we're seeing it come back a bit. And also what analysts were saying to watch for today was the large institutional investors, the portfolio managers and the like. They were expected to sit out the open, try to get a sense of the direction of the market before they came into the marketplace. Right now we see volume picking up a little bit. This could be the first signs that some of those big players are getting into the marketplace, and they may be coming in on the upside, doing some buying, since those losses on the NASDAQ are coming back significantly. Some of the tech stocks starting to make gains, actually. We saw Cisco Systems down better than 4.5% a while back. It is now down about 3%. So right now, Paula, the internals, if you will, the fundamentals, beginning to improve on the NASDAQ as it slowly tries to claw its way back.
Any thoughts there? How might all of this action with the airline stocks today as they plummet might have on other sectors of the travel industry? Tom Parsons just brought up in the last interview talking about how the hotel industry might be affected and cruise lines and the rental car industry.
Without a doubt, Paula, there is a large ripple effect. We saw one particular pocket really hit hard this morning, and that were the internet travel companies, Travelocity, Priceline.com, Expedia, and the like. Those stocks were down anywhere from 30 to 50%. They remain weak, along with the airlines that trade on the NASDAQ. And again, watch those hotel stocks. They're expected to continue to show weakness throughout the day. Again, until they get some real kind of tangible sign out of Washington that some effort, some movement, progress is being made on the possible help for the airline industry.
All right, Greg Clarkin, thanks so much. See you in a little bit. Let's go back to Andy Serwer. I've finally gotten your name right. Give me some credit here. Your reaction to everything we've just heard, from what Greg reported and what Tom Parsons is reporting about the flying public.
Well, you know, the airline business has been a terrible business for years and years and years. It wasn't exactly a bastion of strength or health even before this started. It has been a basket case. It was weakening as the economy was weakening, and now we're in bad shape.
And that is sort of reflected. We were looking at the overall Dow Jones picture, but
and
the
there
airline
we have those stocks down 40%. The big ones: United, Delta, American, Northwest, U.S. Airlines, all of them doing very poorly. And this is a business that will be very, very different going forward. There's no question about that.
So it is not premature for someone to start asking questions about the survival of individual airlines.
I think that's right. I think this business is going to change, Paul. I think there's going to be more consolidation. You'll see companies being put together. There may be partnerships with overseas airlines. We've seen that already before, but they may be even more firmed up and more formalized.
But the bottom line is, and I think you mentioned this later, that it's ultimately going to give consumers less choices.
I think that's right. I mean, flying is going to be more difficult. You're going to spend more time going through security, and it's going to be a difficult situation.
Your reflections on what the intraday graphic is showing us right now?
We had this big drop at the beginning, a nice, very sharp slide there at one point. We leveled off, we trended up. Now we're trending back down a bit. If you can call this stabilization, maybe this is it. The overseas markets were down about 5% over the past couple days. And we are down somewhere around 5%. So maybe that's what Mr. Market is telling us, that this tragedy means that securities on the New York Stock Exchange need to be marked down 5%. We're not over yet. I still think there are going to be some more bumps. There might be some more very dark days ahead in terms of the economy, in terms of the market. But here's where we are right now, and that's all we really know.
I know that you and I were asking Lou Dobbs and Christine Roman some questions earlier on, and they were feeling, even though the overseas market showed that there was a 5% drop and then the stability was regained late in the trading day, they don't necessarily think the U.S. markets are going to do the same thing.
Well, yes and no. I mean, the foreign markets follow the lead of the U.S. market, and since the U.S. markets weren't trading, they were following what they thought the U.S. markets were doing. So maybe they were right in that the markets are down 5% and they matched it, sort of presaging that drop.
You have spent a lot of time on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Give us your insights into how some of those traders are feeling right now. It's an unprecedented level of pressure on them, isn't it?
It's a lot of pressure, and this is a really tight-knit group of people. It's a very patriotic group. You know, we've seen a lot of American flags down there today, but I have to tell you, if you go to the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, you're going to see a lot of American flags even before this tragedy. These are people who care about America and work awfully, awfully hard. There's a tremendous amount of pressure down there, and today the eyes of the world are on them, and I think they truly are responding.
All right, let's go back to what the stock exchange looked like before the opening bell. This was the time when the chairman called for 2 moments of silence, and he called for it flanked by the governor of New York, the mayor of New York, and both of New York senators, as well the Treasury Secretary. Let's pause and try to experience that moment once again.
Our hopes are up, and we're excited to be back to work. That's the mood on the floor itself. People are excited to be back, anxious. It's going to be a crazy couple of days, perhaps weeks, even months, but we're ready.
You know, on one hand, it's a very sad situation. On the other hand, you're very happy to see your colleagues and your friends.
Police, fire, emergency rescue, these wonderful men and women who put their lives on the line. This couldn't happen without their great guidance and help, and certainly their love and affection for this great country. Let us all pause.
God bless America, land that I love.
This nation has unified, has come together. We're going to send a message to these criminals. They cannot destroy the American way of life. They can't destroy this economy. And this great market will lead us to higher and more productive levels in the future. Our heroes will now open the marketplace. The green button.
I think I can say that is the first time I can remember when you couldn't actually hear the opening bells of the New York Stock Exchange, of course, drowned out by the applause and the show of solidarity that so many of the workers there today showed, both in their honoring the 2 minutes of silence preceding the opening bell and their thoughts, as you heard, going into the opening of the markets. Let's go back to Bill Hemmer right now, who joins us from outside the Stock Exchange. With an update on how people are going back to work. Hi, Bill.
Paula, good morning once again. Eddie Tumbarella, did I say it right?
Tumbarella.
Works on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Right. We just heard the replay of the moment of silence and the singing of God Bless America. You were inside. You work here. What did it feel like to you?
I think it was very therapeutic. It sent chills up my back, my spine. I just felt great. I don't think there was a dry eye in the house.
Well, you say there are sometimes moments of silence on the floor, but today was different.
Today it was different. Usually moments of silence are reserved for when members of the exchange die, or maybe a president dies, and just today just felt like we were all in this thing together. It was just been fantastic to hear that song being sung, and it just felt great. It just felt great to get back into the city, back to the exchange. I feel good. I feel good about it.
You were off today. You decided to come to work. You were telling me about a sense of camaraderie that you felt. You described it as old school, to borrow a phrase.
Very old school.
Tell me more about that.
Well, New York Stock Exchange is very old school. I think we actually take this very personally. I know I do. I think everybody, not only in the city, but the country, takes it personally. And I just felt that I had to come back to work today. I felt it was very therapeutic. I felt good. I was a little tentative at first, but once I heard that bell ring and I heard God Bless America, I felt really good. I felt great about it.
All right, hang in there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Okay, good luck to you.
Thank you.
Also talking to some of the other traders up the street, Paul, oftentimes they come outside for a little break, some fresh air, possibly a drag on a cigarette, and they were saying that inside the New York Stock Exchange there were 5,000 people with 5,000 different stories. They were talking about it earlier today before they opened, but once the market got rolling, quickly their attention went back to the business at hand. There are more stories across town, just a few blocks away at Ground Zero. CNN's Michael Oku checking in now from there. Michael, what do you have?
Bill, the stock market may be open, but from my vantage point, this is a neighborhood and an entire area that is far from returning to any kind of normalcy. Rescue workers, often working on 24-hour shifts, continue to sift through the rubble and the concrete and the sometimes very hot steel and iron of Ground Zero. And we are told that, according to FEMA, the debris removal officially now will take months. That is what they say. It will take months. And we understand that the EPA is here, that they are checking the air, and that there are decontamination units just on site. And they're looking into the possibility that one of the buildings close to Ground Zero contained a high level of freon. So that's a development that we're going to be watching here today as well. As you can see, the smoke continues to billow outside of the site, sometimes reaching such a degree of thickness that it belies the fact that this is something that happened now almost a week ago. The New York City Fire Commissioner tells us that there are fires burning deep within the rubble, which accounts, of course, for the smoke, which gets rather thick. I spoke moments ago to a firefighter, Kenny Haskell, who may have lost two of his brothers, both firefighters. One was found the other day dead, and the other is missing. This is what he had to say.
Timmy's a firefighter in Squad 18, which is here in Manhattan. My brother Tommy is the captain of Ladder Company 132 in Brooklyn. Initially, a fire of this magnitude necessitates a multiple alarm response. So Tommy's company come in from Brooklyn actually on the first call, which was immediately a fifth alarm. I was home myself at the time when I heard it on the news, and they were recalling all firemen to come into the city if they were off duty to report to their firehouses, which is what I did. And as I was on my way in, I was trying to inquire whether or not Timmy and Tommy were in fact both working. I wasn't sure at the time. It wasn't until I actually got in here into Manhattan at sometime that night, 8, 9 o'clock at night, that I saw some people that confirmed that they were both in fact inside the buildings when they came down. Timmy's been found, he was found several days ago. I was underneath Tower 1, a void of Tower 1 the day before yesterday when word had spread that they had found him, and some of the members from my company came and got me, and they told me that Timmy had been found, and I left, and they had sent the van to pick me up.
It's an extraordinary story, one of just many. Rescue workers say they continue to find more body parts than they actually find bodies, and at an alarmingly faster rate than they had in the past few days. They are desperate to find anything, any signs of life whatsoever. One rescue worker earlier this morning told us that in an area of the rubble that was completely incinerated, they found a single Bible, and that gave them some hope. One other rescue worker came by here moments ago and gave us only this, a photograph. Whether these people worked in the building or not, we do not know. But they're happy at this point only to find anything. Bill?
Michael Oku over Ground Zero. After being there for the better part of yesterday, they also give stories about finding small crevices and taking the smallest man in the group and dropping them down by rope or by line, checking again for bodies and the possibility of human life almost a week after that terrible tragedy last Tuesday. I want to take you back here on Wall Street now. Well, what they're telling us here, the eyewitnesses from last Tuesday, this is a concrete canyon that comes down Broad Street. They're saying when the first building collapsed last week, a huge 70-foot high, 7-story tall, a wall of just ash and soot and smoke came pouring down this canyon. When the second building went down, they say similar scene, but then the smoke was even darker and blacker, and some describe this scene as almost looking like night. And we can see, even though the sanitation crews have been out for the past 6 days, there's still debris. This was brought to us on the roof here, pieces of paper, again, that have blown out of the World Trade Center, and you can see, again, as we have seen earlier, the singed edges of these papers here. And yet again, another reminder of not only the massive job ahead, but again, the incredible tragedy that we witnessed here. More than 5,000 still missing. We'll watch it here again from Wall Street. Back to Paula now. Paula.
Bill, so many of the folks you talked with this morning seem so determined to get back to work. Are they afraid to be there today?
Yeah, some indeed have expressed that very thing. And we have seen Paula walk away from the stock exchange in tears earlier today. It's quite difficult to ascertain what their emotions were at the time, but clearly they were broken up. And, you know, we have talked to some people down here, as evidenced by the interviews we're doing, but a number of people still say they don't want to talk. In fact, one person told us he's all talked out. He doesn't know what else to say. And indeed, one can pick up on that attitude and that emotion that is so strong at this point.
All right, Bill Hemmer, thanks so much. See you in a little bit.
Okay.
I want you to check out the stats in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. The Dow down now. I've got to wait here for this to recycle. 470 points. NASDAQ down some 70 points. And I wanted to give you a historical perspective now on how the Dow has fared during other traumatic events. Following the torpedoing of the British ship Lusitania in 1915, after which the U.S. entered World War I, the Dow was down more than 4% after one day. It was down 7.3% after 1 week, and it was up more than 43% after 5 years. Following the bombing of Pearl Harbor in 1941, the Dow was down almost 3% after one day. It was down 4.6% after 1 week, and it was up more than 46% after 5 years. Let's fast forward to the period of time following Iraq's invasion of Kuwait in 1990. The Dow was down almost 2% after one day. It was down 3.7% after 1 week, and it was up more than 63% after 5 years. Following the bombing of the World Trade Center in 1993, the Dow was down 0.5% after one day, 1% after 1 week. After 5 years, 151.9%. I want to call your attention now to the ongoing rescue operations underway in New York City. Some workers working 24 hours on, 24 hours off. The Federal Emergency Management Agency is now saying that its top priority remains the recovery of those who might still be alive under the debris of the World Trade Center in New York. A quote from Ted Manette, who is an official there, quote, "We're going to stay in the rescue and the response mode for as long as it takes until we are sure we have done everything possible. As long as there is hope, We're going to continue that effort. The city's going to continue that effort. The state's going to continue it. And those urban search and rescue teams are going to continue it. And in the best judgments of the professionals, at some time in the future, they will make that decision as to when we go into recovery. Of course, the agency trying to figure out the amount of damage done. They continue to remove tons and tons of debris. The FEMA officials saying that perhaps at the end of the cleanup operation, maybe as many as 6,000 tons might be hauled out of the debris field. I want to share with you now the cover of the New Yorker magazine that has just come out, hitting newsstands September 24th. And I think it graphically shows you the toll that this disaster has not only taken on New York City, but the rest of the nation. If you open this little insert, you will, and I don't know if you can make it out on the screen, you will see two very dark images which are supposed to represent what once were the 107 stories, twin towers of the World Trade Center. We're going to take a short pause here, but I wanted to let you know coming up we are going to be going live to Afghanistan for the very latest from there. A high-level Pakistani delegation has arrived there, delivering a demand, what some folks are actually calling an ultimatum for the Taliban to turn over the Osama bin Laden leader and supporters or else face military action. Let's take a short break now, and our coverage will continue right after this.
I'm a mother. I'm a thinker. I'm a friend. And I am we. I am we.
Introducing We, Women's Entertainment, a new television network for women that celebrates all the things we are, with our favorite movies and original series that share our vision, our vitality, and all that we value. If you want We, Women's Entertainment, call 1-866-29-IAM-WE and say,
We is for me.
This is a complete broadband solution with a nitro-powered on switch. This is igniting your mission-critical applications on the fattest optical IP pipe on the planet. This is your business, screaming 1,000 times faster than yesterday. This is moving beyond connected. This is riding the light. This is the technology that makes it happen. Quest. Ride the light.
And welcome back to our continuing coverage of America at War. We go now to Afghanistan, where Nick Robertson is standing by with the very latest. Nick, what is the latest from Afghanistan?
Well, Paula, the meetings you talked of before, the Pakistani diplomatic mission here to tell the Taliban to hand over Osama bin Laden has been completed. They had 2 rounds of talks today, one with the foreign minister here, Pakistan delegation telling us that they'd come here not only to tell the Taliban to hand over Osama bin Laden, but that they had very little time to do it and that they should resolve the problem quickly. Now, the Taliban foreign minister said that they would consider this issue and they would consider it at the highest levels. This diplomatic delegation from Pakistan had one security chief and one former ambassador to Afghanistan. Both people quite influential here, perhaps as far as Pakistan goes, the best people they could send to influence the Taliban at this time. They then met with the supreme spiritual leader of the Taliban, Mullah Omar. That meeting went somewhat longer, we understand. There was no specific comment after that meeting, but high Taliban officials tell us that they'd heard this message before and that they would consider it. Now, later in the day, Supreme Leader Mullah Omar of the Taliban has announced by radio that religious scholars should gather in Kabul tomorrow, 20 from each province. There are 30 provinces in Afghanistan. That's some 600 of the most senior religious leaders in Afghanistan should gather in Kabul. And he said there they would make up their decisions about these issues, Osama bin Laden, about whether or not, if Afghanistan is attacked by America, then they should declare a jihad. These will be the decisions that this ulama will be, this religious leaders' council will be working on tomorrow.
Once these religious leaders meet, do you expect them to answer this demand within that 3-day period?
They are quite capable of reaching consensus fairly quickly. There was a meeting of religious scholars in one province recently, and they advised the Taliban to keep the doors open to diplomacy. Their meeting lasted only several hours. So they're quite capable of coming up with an answer in a fairly short space of time. There are a few key figures that most others in the council will probably look towards to influence them. After they've made their decision, it's likely that Mullah Omar will take that on board, but it's also very likely that he could make a final ruling himself. So whatever they say may not necessarily be the complete and final outcome. Paula?
Are there any indications there is any preparation for a potential military strike against Afghanistan now underway?
Well, certainly some people that can afford to get their families out of town have taken them out of the towns of Kandahar, Kabul, Jalalabad, all the big cities around the country where the Taliban feel they might be hit by missiles. On the streets, and we traveled some 300 miles today to come down from Kabul to the southern city of Kandahar, the spiritual capital of the Taliban. And on the roads, business looked like normal, but what one did notice were there were far fewer children around in the cities and far fewer women around in the cities. And what we've been told is that many people have chosen to get their families out of town. We also understand from the United Nations High Commission for Refugees in Pakistan that there are significant numbers of refugees moving towards Pakistan at this time.
Do you have any idea of what number of people are trying to head for the Pakistani border?
From where we stand, that's difficult to gauge. When we look at the streets, they're still fairly busy. The markets are still busy. There's still meat hanging on the hooks in the butcher's shops. The bread stores are still making bread daily. The furniture makers are there. The car mechanics are there. You know, essentially on the streets just looks like business as usual, but just a little thinner. One doesn't see any big military preparation underway here, driving down from Kabul again. I mean, very few checkpoints on the road, as one might think that there might be in a country so close possibly to a state of war. So it does appear superficially as business as normal. But trying to gauge figures, very, very difficult to say. Very few people in Afghanistan actually have the finances to try and get their families out. There's been 22 years of war ongoing here, and many people here live a sort of a hand-to-mouth existence, if you will, really trying to figure out how they're going to get their meal on the table at the end of the day. They don't have the money to buy a car to get out of town. They can't buy the fuel to put in a car and get themselves out of town. So the availability, the possibility for many people to leave, to get away, that's just not on here. Paula?
Even if Pakistan continues to cooperate and support the U.S. and its friendly nations' efforts, what will happen to Afghanistan when Pakistan no longer provides money to the Taliban, no longer provides weapons?
It's a serious blow for the Taliban. The Taliban would say that they don't derive a lot of support from Pakistan, but most intelligence experts who study this region would say to the contrary. Certainly the Taliban, one of the things it needs most of all is soldiers. Many of those soldiers come from the madrasas, the religious schools across the border in Pakistan. Severing or blocking relations between Pakistan and Afghanistan will dent the Taliban's military capability, will hurt the economy because a lot of food and economic trade goes on between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And even the short-term prognosis for the Taliban under a sustained closure of the border with Pakistan and a sustained abatement of relationships at a political level has to really sound an alarm bell for the Taliban. It's not a good situation for them. There are very, very few other friends that they can turn towards at this time.
Do you expect to be leaked any information by the Taliban or any of the religious leaders as they go about the process of trying to decide whether they will comply with this demand?
We have a good few people who are fairly well placed to pick up the thoughts as they deliberate during the day. I do hope and I do expect that we will be able to get some kind of a ruling as the deliberation goes. But as I say, whatever the outcome of the deliberation of that religious council, it can still be countermanded by Mullah Omar. He is the supreme religious leader of the Taliban, and his word is essentially law. He will listen to all those around him, but he will make up his mind at the end of the day. He will be guided, but it will be his decision at the end of the day.
Nick Robertson, thank you so much for that report. And we want to thank all of you for joining us throughout the morning. It is now my time to leave and hand the reins over to my colleagues Judy Woodruff and Aaron Brown on the other side. CNN's continuing coverage will start again right after this short break.
Refinancing your mortgage may be easier than you think. Just log on to Ditech.com or call 1-800-71-FIX. Today's low fixed rate with 0 points is only 6.750%. With interest rates lower, now may be a great time to get cash or use the equity in your home to consolidate bills. It's smart money from Ditech.com. Apply online or call us at 1-800-71-FIX.
For the latest developments as events unfold in America's new war, stay with CNN.
Hi, Billy Mays here for OxyClean, the stain specialist. Powered by the air you breathe, activated by the water that you and I drink. It's Mother Nature approved, then it's safe on your colored fabrics. OxyClean seeks out organic stains. It'll even take red wine and grape juice out of white carpeting. Make a paste, make it 10 times as powerful. It'll whiten your grout and get rid of your toughest stains. Soak your fabrics, even lace. It has the power of bleach without the damaging side effects of chlorine. Use it in your laundry. It'll make your whites whiter, your brights brighter. Call now and you'll receive a whopping 6-pound bucket of OxyClean for just $19.95. But if you call in the next 20 minutes, we'll also include a squirt bottle, a super chamois, and a bottle of our world-famous Orange Clean free. Here's how to order.
Call to order your 6-pound bucket of OxyClean for only $19.95. Call now and we'll include the super chamois, squirt bottle, and Orange Clean absolutely free. Call 1-800-429-3883. Call now.
How would you like to lose that big belly and save big money? Then you need the Abdur system, designed to aerobically burn fat as it flattens your abs in just minutes a day, and it's yours for a fraction of the cost. Look, ab machines strengthen muscles but won't reduce your waist, and some exercises can make your muscles bigger. Only the Abdur's rotating torso trimmer targets your upper abs, lower abs, and obliques, all in one fat-burning